It's a straightforward process and kind of a one-stop shop.
So basically, a landlord just has to apply for what we call a landlord license application. Under the definitions in the code, it's a business license, but we just call it a landlord license to make it simple. It's all done on the city's website. This is not something that's done through the state of Washington like our usual business licenses are. You go through BLS, you get your business license. You have to have a UBI number for business licenses, but that's not applicable here, and why we run it through just our own city website. And when you get your application, I call it free gift. You're registered with the landlord application program, and that gets over with the police department that Joe Sexton works with all the information that comes in off the landlord licenses. It's a flat fee of $75, and if you own 100 units or you own 10 units, just a flat fee of $75. And with this process that we're doing here today, we're not making changes to that.
75.
75. I'm still having a good.
Me too. I have I know.
It looks like it's Hans.
Hans.
Well, because
That's fun to say with an echo. Hans.
Yeah.
All right, let's
We'll just pause.
yeah.
I think it's
You want us to pause or do you want us to keep going?
keep going.
Good now.
That's okay.
Okay.
The echoes with Hans now. Wait, he's back. Okay.
Okay.
He's muted.
All right. So
Well, you want me to
Go-
talk
go
about
ahead,
that? Yeah, just going along with that, if interested parties want to look up their property either by their landlord name or their address, you can do that on the city's website now. IT worked real hard for
Nice.
us to stand this up, and it's up and functional right now. So if you go, you can see the URL there. You can look anybody up, and you probably all know some names of landlords. And it's what I did. I put their names in, and all their properties popped up real quick, real easy to use. I think say one more about what we do with the process.
Is it hyperlinked on a page?
Yeah, we have a whole landlord license page
Okay.
and where you can register for your landlord license, or you can look one up. It's on one place.
Thanks for letting me know.
Just a little bit about the rental registration, what the requirements are, because the council asks that of us every time we come forward. If you're going to be a snowbird and you're only gone for a few months a year for less, you can rent out your property and you're not subject to getting a landlord license as long as it's less than 4 months. If you're going to rent out a bedroom to a friend of yours, then you live in the house, that's also exempt from obtaining a landlord license. And make no mistake, short-term rentals are not something that falls under the landlord license program. That's operating a business, and you're required to get a real live business license for that. And you have to pay into all the hotel motel taxes, et cetera. So they are not subject to what we're talking about tonight.
And just to be clear too, so these are policy decisions that were made as a part of BMC 5.02. The council made to exempt casual and ancillary rentals. Those are not necessarily in line with the state law of what landlords have to comply with. So just so that there's no confusion, like we have a registration process and a licensing process, and the council has chosen to exempt these types of rentals. The state law could certainly apply to those. So I don't want people to interpret that if you are just renting a bedroom, you don't have to comply with any state laws. There is a disconnect here. So that's fine. They don't have to be the same. There can be different policy decisions here. But you might have to, for example, give notice of, under the Residential Landlord Tenant Act at state law for some of these situations, like the casual rental or the ancillary rental, where we're just not, as a city, regulating that. And that's not as a part of this code. It was a 5.0 business license.
Can I just is it okay if I just to clarify what I heard? They're still subject to state law regarding landlord tenant laws.
Right.
A friend renting out a bedroom, it's still subject to the same rights.
Yeah, and without getting into like when all that might apply,
Right.
Just wanted to let people know that
They just don't have to get a business
They
license.
don't have to do this process
For those
these
exemptions.
situations. Doesn't mean they might
Thank
not
you.
have other processes.
Thank
Just
you.
not for-
Which makes sense.
Yeah. Anyway. So this is just to reiterate, no new requirements, no new fees, no new inspections. We want that to be really clear. There, and we'll get into that a little bit more later, but comparing what Bremerton's doing versus other cities, for a law-abiding landlord who's been complying with existing code, this is nothing new. You know, this is a good thing because it levels the playing field. You don't have people who don't abide by the law competing with people who do, and you don't have unsafe housing in our neighborhood. So hopefully it's pretty clear what we're trying to show. This is the big, I guess, change, and this is that you must be registered to evict. And evict is a term that is, you know, everyone kind of knows what that is. Under the law, it's about the terms are, you know, recovering possession. But essentially, if you're renting out a property and say someone stops paying you rent, you're not going to be able to vacate them out. You're not going to be able to get possession unless you've registered. So when you try to file that lawsuit in Superior Court, that tenant is under Washington law going to get a lawyer. And because we've been working with Kids Up Legal Aid Services, that lawyer's going to know that you have to be registered to get the eviction. And they're going to be able to look it up on our website, and they're going to tell you that it's a defense. And so that's how that's going to work, and hopefully get people to comply.
I had a question on that.
Sure.
I have a constituent who was renting out a bedroom to a couple, and then they quit paying the rent, and he lives in the house. They quit paying the rent and were disruptive. And his lawyer told him that he had to immediately, like within 24 hours, tell them they had to leave. So
I don't think it's
by this,
So I think
Is
for this,
this-
it's gonna, that would be
that would be
this
under
code,
the state law then.
ancillary rental. And so
so
this code would not apply to.
Not
that
germane to
situation.
it'd just be the state.
Say whatever you have to
Yeah.
comply with.
Okay.
I had a question. So, could a landlord literally go apply online for his,
Yes.
and then go to the courthouse and
Yes.
apply for, okay, so. Doesn't have to be 30 days or
No.
whatever.
Okay, so an unlicensed landlord, to Michael's point, can go apply for a license the day they decide to evict somebody, even though they've been unlawfully in our city renting.
Yeah.
Okay, whatever, $25.
Yeah.
I guess we'll take it.
All right. I told Eric I wouldn't. This is relocation assistance. This is what we talked
Radioactive.
about it.
So radioactive.
Yeah, no, that was yeah. So
Perfect.
if the landlord has been issued a notice to vacate, if a property's been issued a notice to vacate, a landlord is required to provide relocation assistance. It's the greater of $2,000 plus the deposit and any unpaid rent, or 3 times the rent and deposit and unpaid rent. Almost always we're going to be in that latter category.
Is that the current spot or the new spot?
It's the current spot. It's what it's based on.
Based on the rent of that landlord is currently charging?
Yes.
I still have a clarifying question about the code when it's appropriate to ask.
Sure.
So to Michael's point about just going and getting a license under this code, under this wording, if a landlord tries to begin an eviction process and then the tenant lawyers up, says you can't do that, the landlord can then go get a license and become compliant immediately.
Right.
But unless his building is crap.
This is different, yeah.
This is different. This is a different part. So like,
Okay, then I'd like to clarify that at an appropriate time when we're back to that wording. I'm
Right,
sorry.
it's not-
I'm still back there.
oh, okay, well, that's fine. Do you want us to go back one?
Would that be okay? I'll try. Thank you. That's what I'm thinking about still. Because I think, does anybody have is it just me that has a problem with that?
Well, I think if I'm reading this correctly, the landlord could go and get the license, but they would be lying, saying that it was up to date, right? So then it's not a
They
valid
can become
license.
No, I
compliant.
mean, they can be.
You can be non-compliant.
Yeah, they can be, no, it's like well, the idea here is that it's to get people to register, right? And so, if they haven't registered, we would normally, like, if we found out about that, even through code enforcement, let's say it's separate from an eviction action, we would send them a letter and say, you need to register by such and such date. And if they do, then it's fine. We don't,
So I'm sorry. So they're going to get, I mean, basically it's a kind of a technical assistance in a sense to say, hey, you can't do this eviction process because you're not in compliance. So they're going to be told to be in compliance, even though they've been in non-compliance. And come on, if you're a landlord, you know you're supposed to have a freaking license. And so just in order to retaliate and sue and kick out their tenant.
So
Do you see where I'm going with
there are separate protections for tenants that might be getting retaliated against if it's, but this is an eviction related to any reason. It could be
Okay.
non-payment of rent, it could be anything. It's not necessarily tied to the code. So if there's separate protections, if the tenant is the person who alerted the city to an unsafe condition, I mean, that person's gonna get relocated anyway, so they're gonna be.
I understand. That's the next part. I think I'm just gonna think about it a little bit longer and I might just be overthinking it, which is happens a lot and with this issue for me, you know.
Oh, Denise.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we remember that not all landlords do realize that they have to have a license. There are many small landlords that might not. And to Kylie's point, that the whole meaning of this is to get them registered, I think is a positive way of looking at it. Whether or not we don't want to punish people necessarily who weren't aware. They might have one rental and they didn't realize that they needed a landlord license. As hard as that is for us to believe, we're much more closely associated with this. And there are probably a lot of landlords out there, obviously, who aren't registered, and some of them don't realize that they should be.
Sure, and I hope I wasn't speaking in absolutes. That wasn't my intent.
So, Jane and then Michael.
So I'm wondering if this really counts. On the registration process, it says that they have to sign a declaration that all rental units comply with the Residential Landlord Tenant Act, which is part of the safety regulations, correct?
Right. Yeah.
So then if they were,
So if they lie and
Mhm.
they were, then there's a whole process where then they have to submit to upper code enforcement,
okay,
which is the next part. So we can
Okay.
get into it.
Thank you.
It might, yeah,
Drift
it
back
might-
a little bit.
as we go through it too, it might help kind of see it all laid out.
So I was kind of, the reason I brought that up was kind of along your thinking, but then a little clarity just hit me and said, the goal of here is to connect with the landlords and have them registered. So that's the main thing.
Okay.
It's not to prevent evictions. Hopefully this won't have any
Okay.
effect on evictions. We're not trying to get involved in the legal process of a landlord and a tenant or whatever. But it might gain them a few days of, because my understanding is if this doesn't stop the legal action, that's all going to run forward. But then the defense of the tenant can say, you're not registered. This is judge, throw it out, or
Right.
don't do this. And it might buy them some time.
Yeah, so
Thank you. Thanks for entertaining. Thanks for letting me go back there. Appreciate it. Colleagues, we can move forward if y'all are ready.
all right, so that's the relocation assistance and how that works, and that's by state law. So there's not really a lot that we can change about that, but it's it also, if we keep going forward, how it works is that well, you can jump in on this if you want. So notice to vacate is issued. So that's usually by our code enforcement team, and it's not for cosmetic things. It's really dangerous situations, and so I want to make it clear that this isn't something that we do like all the time or something like that. It's an unfortunate situation, and we're about to show you some examples. So this is one that was from last year. If you see that walkway on the right, that was actually what the tenant needed to walk on to access their apartment.
And there was water meters and wiring that were in pools of water. And it was seriously dangerous.
So
to
if
the
you see
tenants.
the kind of structure that's sort of hanging off the side on the left of that picture, the picture on the right is the underside of that. And so that was how the person got to their apartment. And let's see the next one. This is another one, from last year. So if you think that this is like, oh, yeah, like, give you an idea of what the rent was. See that board kind of on the left, kind of sticking up in the ceiling? That was holding the ceiling up. And so a lot going on here, so it was not safe. So that was just, hopefully to give you an idea that we're not, this isn't like, oh, the grass is too tall or their paint needs to be updated or something like that. This is really like healthy.
People should not be living in these
Right.
conditions.
And so upon the issuance of the notice to vacate, the landlord and the tenant are notified that the tenant may be entitled to relocation assistance, and within 7 days, the landlord has to either pay it to the tenant, and once again, it's 3 times the rent, plus the deposit, prepaid rent, or submit proof to the city that they're entitled to an exemption. And so these are the ways that you can qualify for an exemption. One, there was a natural disaster, and it's not their fault. There's an earthquake, and that's not going to, mean that everyone has to do relocation assistance. It's really, if you read all these, it's all, it's not their fault. The other one is if it's a tenant or a third party's illegal conduct without the landlord's knowledge. So if someone got into the apartment and stripped it and caused a bunch of damage and the landlord had no idea, then that's going to be a situation that they don't have to then pay to relocate that person. The acquisition by eminent domain. Odd that they put that in there, but it's in there. So if we're acquiring the property, if they don't pay the tenant, then we can. And John had this great graphic. Oh, wait, that is a moving box. It looked like the person was running away with the money. That they're relocating.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love the graphics on this. Love 'em.
So the city can advance payment to the tenant and then push through the landlord. And the way that looks is, keep going. Yeah. We also get penalties if they don't pay. It's $50 a day, and we can get that per tenant and also with interest, and it's 12%.
Wow. I have a question about that. May I?
Go ahead.
Is that, what's the legal limit for debt? Oh gosh, I'm sorry, I'm blanking. It is really warm in here too, by the way. Yeah. But what's the legal limit in our state for interest?
12%.
12%, and then
It's on the next slide.
and so 12% in addition to
Attorney's fees and costs.
$50 a day.
They're $50.
Wow. Okay. All right.
Throw out 2 extreme cases. So let's say one case you have a landlord who's competent, has tons of money, just does not get the property up. In this case, you can go after them.
Mhm.
Let's say though it's somebody who's they're a landlord, but they're elderly. The property has slipped away from them. They don't have support. It's just a really unfortunate circumstance all around. In that case, the city could choose not to pursue this course. Is that right?
Well, I mean, we always have a choice.
Yeah.
But there would also be, I think, a concern if we just were making those calls, like whether it was like to get the public funds or something like that, if we weren't going after it. I have to think about that. Like,
Okay.
There's also resources that we can connect folks with, and we try to be cognizant of those extra factors. We do have discretion on who we go after for code enforcement. I will say that generally speaking, before we get to a notice to vacate, there's often a history of code enforcement for the property where we're trying to work with the landlord to,
And then if I could add to your second example is that when we see those kinds of things, oftentimes we try to hook that landlord up with KCR and our weatherization program. So we try to get to it before it gets to that point.
Excellent.
So I don't know of very many of those.
Yeah, probably rare, hopefully.
yeah. So
Rare, but we did have a situation like that.
That's true.
Well,
We have seen them,
I don't know if I don't know if anyway, but there has been a situation like that with people. So I guess is it too much? Are there other cities that are implementing this exact?
we're about to see that. Well,
Yeah.
that part's state law, so that one's gonna be the same all across the board.
It's gonna be state, okay, thank you.
or I think it should be. So just to give you an idea of,
I'm just setting you up for that.
I know.
Yeah.
It's like a segue. So this is, I don't know, John picked these cities. I don't know why, which ones to pick, but we told him we just wanted a good sample. So if you look across the top, it gives us the fees that are being charged. You can see that Bremerton's are definitely,
The cheapest.
the cheapest. This is not like I guess up here so that, because we want to open up the fee discussion. We've already had that one and the council said we didn't want to increase fees, and we're not asking you to increase fees. What this does though, I hope, is let people know that our fees are really fair compared to what everyone else is having to pay around the area. As far as the rest of the things, I also scoop down to the mandatory inspections. And you'll see that we're also really fair in that. So one of the things that we hear pushback on is that these type of regulations increase cost to tenants. And I think we can, say that there's the $75 per landlord fee that Bremerton has is very affordable for landlords, and that we also don't require mandatory outside inspectors is certainly also keeping the cost down for landlords. And so there's nothing that we're doing here that is, like a better word, it's putting a burden that's, different than any other cities or more egregious or anything like that. So, next slide.
I just make a comment on that.
Sure.
What I really like about that, the way we're going about this, is we're giving them all the chances in the world to make this system work.
Right.
And if we find that by acknowledging and, an extra check-in on what the standards are, if they can't do that, we might have to move to a different structure to have the funds that we need to enforce this. So we're really, it's like an honor system where it's a small admin fee, the rules, you do the right things, we're all good. And
Right.
if we need more, we can raise the fees and do something.
And this is certainly a section of code I think the council can certainly revisit. I know that some codes are more difficult to change than others. This is one that, if the council, certainly a phase can make changes as we go along. I'm excited to see where these go, but if it's not accomplishing the goals, certainly revisit it. We have some questions about legal challenges, and the changes that we're making are, I guess, tested. As you saw in the previous slide, other cities have had the registration requirements. Seattle, I think, might have been the first to do so, and they did it, a really long time ago, in 1993. So that case affirmed the requirement for rental registration and fees, and then that was affirmed recently in the 2000 case. So I think we're on solid legal ground with these changes. Some questions about funding and the budget. So the landlord license goes to the general fund. Any fines and penalties go to the city abatement fund, which is where we draw the relocation assistance from. And important to note that all funding has been budgeted for, and there are no adjustments being requested. Eric,
I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Jane, go ahead.
The city abatement fund, we're using that also to try to abate.
We're baiting for it, yeah.
Okay.
We have $100,000 held back in that fund just for relocation.
Okay. But we have plenty to keep going after. Horrible.
That's another project.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'm excited to see this happen. I know we've talked about the relocation for the better part of 2 years even now. So I'm glad to see this.
This is a summary of the changes, and happy to answer any questions. I think my recommendation would be that we put this on general business because it helps people do that, and do the presentation next week and get some public comment.
Love it.
That's a good idea.
General business.
So just to summarize, the history of all this is Nick Wofford, my predecessor in 7. He was really wanted to start this with council going way back, and if I memory is correct, actually requiring outside inspectors of units. And we went through all this many times. And then in 2012, when I got back on council, I picked up the torch from Nick, and we got to this registration process that required everybody to do this. There were still some missing pieces. And the number one goal of the council in 2012, in my opinion, going forward, is not to punish the quote unquote good landlords. And no one wanted to do that. And the Kylie's benefit and Director Spencer's, they've come up with something that just, in my opinion, is the final two pieces of the puzzle that meets that criteria of not hurting, being any more punishing good landlords. And really, this thing does two things. If you're not registering your rentals, you better do it, or else you're not going to be able to take action against your renters. You can't evict them for non-payment because you're not a legitimate business in the eyes. You're not registered with the city. You need to register. Everybody needs to register. It costs $75. Do it. In the meantime, you're also certifying that you're offering a decent place for your tenants, and that's under state law. Again, we're not being punishing. We're not saying you got to go through all this bureaucracy. You got to hire an outside inspector, and you got to pay them, and you're going to pass the costs on to your tenants. That's not happening. And then you correct me if I'm wrong, but this eviction thing is when the city sends out an eviction notice because really unsafe conditions.
That's the relocation.
Relocation.
The
Notice to vacate.
Right. But the relocation assistance
Yes.
is only when the city does that. It's
Yes.
not when a landlord says, I'm going to evict
Right.
you.
No.
That's a contractual thing. That's a civil matter, and we don't get involved in that. This is for when we discover it becomes our
So you've been breaking the
understanding
law.
that this is, and then this kicks in, which we've been missing, and it's also already provided for under state law. You can do this.
Right.
So we're just adopting.
We're adopting it and it helps us get the money back.
Denise has had her hand up. Yeah, so hang on, Denise, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. I know that this has been a long time coming, and I want to commend Kylie and Andrea and staff for getting us to this point. This feels really good. It feels really proactive, positive. I'm wondering, and I think I've asked this before, but I can't remember what you said. Communication. How do we get this out to landlords? How do we get this out to the community? What kind of communication plan do we have? And by the way, I love the infographics.
Yeah, thanks. So
Great job.
two things have already happened. I've gone to 2 meetings for the Superior Court where evictions happen. They have a practice and procedures committee or work group, and it's attorneys that represent tenants and attorneys that represent landlords in eviction proceedings, along with the court staff that talk through issues. And so they know this is coming. They've been given information on how to provide comments, and certainly they're aware. And so that's going to be for the people that they represent the landlords, the lawyers that advise landlords, and often, do so proactively with updates on what the law is and things like this. This is going to be a part of what they're telling their clients. It's also, Washington's the only state in the country that provides a public defender, an eviction defense attorney at public expense. So our local provider of that service is Kitsap Legal Aid Services. They are well aware. We've met with them several times. And so anyone who has, involvement in the eviction process is aware this is happening, as we've been getting the word out. I also have contact information to reach out to the Navy's JAG office, who also provides information to sailors and that might be tenants, and they go to that office. They do usually refer them to, I think, Kitsap Legal Aid Services, but it's a point at which that we could, share the information more. But and then we talked about some other options.
Yeah, I'd really like to see more. That's great. Those all involved with the legal system. But even free ad in the Kitsap Sun or something, just proactively letting people know that, rent out spaces or, or our landlords are ready and don't have any problems. Hey, did you know? So just wondering how proactive we can get in this that shouldn't cost all that much money.
Sure.
Okay, so we're gonna go Jennifer and then Mike.
How are you mitigating potential abuse of this new code? Let's say, I mean, there could be abuse, right? Like you get the word out, we could do a really good job getting out to the community. There's gonna be people inevitably who take advantage of it. Do you have a plan to mitigate that?
Can you explain exactly what you mean?
I don't know, I'm just thinking like, let's say the owner is a family member.
Okay.
And it's somebody who is willingly, like, they're staying there, they're gonna fix up the house for their dad who lives somewhere else or whatever. But then they're like, well, actually, if we wait long enough, the city will pay us to move. I don't know, do you know what I mean? There could be potential abuse. I'm wondering how you would mitigate it and if there's a judgment system in place internally, if it's something you would work out with us in an executive session.
It kind of ties into my question, if I could
Yeah.
throw it out. Same thing. So my question was, if we do a notice to vacate, and then we end up providing some relocation assistance, is there is something in place, kind of like we do in receivership, where we could get that money back from them?
Yeah, no, it's in the state law. So
So that would take.
I mean, that's part of it.
so we would get the money back. But if there's someone who's like,
Can
I
they
guess-
bankrupt out of it? Can they bankrupt out of
We
it?
could take the property though if it goes into receivership.
Receivership,
there's,
okay.
I mean, there's a potential for us to not be able to recover, but it's.
She was
Thank you.
just
I
saying,
You know,
if I can
you tell what I'm
ensure-
cooking.
Maybe, if you have a tenant that's in the unit, because I'm the daughter of the owner, and I destroy the inside of it, I've done that, and that's one thing that they're not qualified to have to pay relocation, because the tenant, that third party, either somebody from the outside or the natural disaster, so if there's been
I
some
wasn't,
change by the tenant, then that wouldn't
I
qualify
wasn't
for
saying
rental.
that. I was saying mainly like if it's an arrangement that they're both okay with, but then they, you know, like the property's already derelict or what have you.
You're concerned about somebody reusing the relocation assistance.
I guess,
Like taking advantage, like basically like they're not really a tenant, like.
I mean, I kind of, yeah, so I just, you know, I guess that's probably something we would talk about in an executive session.
Maybe.
You felt like that was
I mean,
of concern.
no, we wouldn't on whether or not the city advances. So that's gonna be a staff decision. Although I will say if it,
I mean, fraud happens everywhere. I'm
If
just
it
trying to be
happened that way-
fiscally, um,
I can tell you of all the cases that we've actually done a
Proactive.
notice to vacate, we have desperately wanted to have money at our resources to be able to do it. And Kylie told us we can't do it because we have no authority under the city code. to do
okay.
that. And so this is the piece where we've had to work with Kitsap Legal Aid, with the Housing Resources Center, BHA, trying to get these folks some sort of resources so they have some place to stay. And it'd be really great if we had this tool. So that's why
Okay,
I'm
all
like,
right.
I can't imagine a situation because I know what we've seen, and it certainly doesn't feel like anybody working the system. It feels like very much the people that are being worked over.
and I will say that
That's
it
fair.
is discretionary. So like if a situation seems, that the person is maybe somehow not like taking advantage or something, or we run out of money, right? Something like that. This isn't a requirement. It is a may, not a shall. And so we may extend like relocation. So let's say if this council decided not to fund the program at some point, we don't have to change the code. We would just say, sorry, we have funds to advance it, this year, hopefully next year or something like that.
Okay.
Thank
Other
you.
Questions?
So, because we keep using the word advance there, which I understand on the front end, obviously it's money up front, so you can do it. We're not making you spend thousands of dollars to get reimbursed from this. But that also makes me think, like, are we advancing it because the landlord's not able to?
Yes.
So we are gonna try to get the funds
Yeah,
back.
so what happens is that sometimes the landlord is a bad landlord. They're providing an unsafe rental and they're also not very nice. And they, maybe they're live in some other state and we're having a hard time getting in touch with them, but we red tag.
multiple names.
Yeah, and, we said this is an unsafe building and we want to help the people get somewhere else. And so we can advance that. And then there's a whole process in the code where then, they get basically 30 days. And then after 30 days, they have to pay this back. Then $50 starts accruing daily per tenant. And then we can go after them for attorney's fees and costs. And that's a lawsuit that we'll handle in-house. I mean, we would file it for recovery under our code and state law. And
So it could start off at $5,000 worth of relocation assistance, turns into $30,000 worth of fines and penalties. And that $30,000 goes back into the abatement fund for more payments.
And
to
that's
people.
by RCW, not discretionary. Once you start that process, there is no discretion for the fees.
Well, we can negotiate. Yeah, there is just,
Okay.
any lawsuit, there's always going to be discretion.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah, so I think this is great. I think that, if you see, something's going off the rails that we have to come back to this someday and tighten something up, I think that'd be fine. I really liked in the earlier slides, I liked the thing where you guys were saying that, of course, state law still applies. I don't know if you want to just add that to the slide. I think it would be maybe a little that little the simple matrix.
Sure.
I think that could be good. But I also liked the presentation, with the exception of the nuclear warning.
That's my favorite part.
The nuclear option, I get it, it's a nuclear option,
You've
right?
not spent 20 years on a nuclear submarine.
Yeah, this is like the last.
My dad was a nuke inspector.
It's like, it's a good hazard. Symbol.
Very good.
I think that will be the biggest communication challenge is that notice to vacate. Like this, just making it very clear that there's a very specific circumstances and not just to repeat it. Yeah.
Yeah, it has to be a city
Yeah.
code enforcement action. That needs to be clear in their presentation.
Yeah.
This
How
isn't-
many do we do on average a year?
Was the last.
But that's really clearly.
So it's not
These
a
aren't
lot.
It's not. I think we'll be okay. And I'll tell you, well, I'm way over the amount of time you told me.
No, it's okay.
It's our fault.
So tenants also have rights when they go after the landlord for this type of thing. And so, this will allow us to move faster. Cause I will just say that not having something in place to help people has caused us to be more,
Slower to move. on
well, it's
these.
not slower because we're not reactive. It's like, we don't want to displace people.
Right, it's more
Exactly.
permissive.
So we're more permissive. And so I was involved recently, one of our building inspectors was being, he was participating in he had been subpoenaed for an arbitration that was going on between the tenant and the landlord. And one of the things that the landlord was bringing up was that, well, if it was unsafe, why did it take the city this long to issue the notice to vacate? And I knew, we were explaining he explained what was going on, but it was basically the concern for the tenants because there was nowhere for them to go. And this certainly doesn't help our housing shortage in the sense that people still need to have somewhere to go. I'm not saying this solves every problem, but it certainly helps when you've got, $7,000 or $8,000 in your pocket, right? I mean,
Yeah.
right. That gives you some options. And so that's where I think will help us when we're dealing with this, moving forward. We're going to be we have money, we've got a process, we've got forms, we can tag it,
Give real help.
give real help. And instead of well, you could call it anyway.
Thank you. I
Very
think
good.
this is a great update.
Thank you
very much. Okay, now we're gonna move on to, agenda bill items. We're kind of running behind in time, but on the mayor, to do these real quick. First one is to confirm, I hope, confirm reappointment of Kirsten Dahlquist to the Design Review Board.
Yeah.
Consent.
Okay,
Oh, sorry.
go ahead, excuse me. Go ahead, Mayor.
Yes, reappointment, experienced, proven, and wants to do it again. So we happy to have her, actually want to do this again. So then her for your approval.
And can I add, both of these appointments, it's to the design review board. Design review board requires credentials. You have to be from the design profession. Both of these are licensed architects. So it's very hard to find a licensed design professional and as a Bremerton resident. And these ladies both fit that bill.
So I'm not being accusatory, okay? I just want to set this up. When you have people from the same firms on design review, and you also have overlapping on the planning commission, if they're looking at a development for design review, and it's something that they were at least partially paid for as a consultant or as the full designer, what are the steps?
They keep roles up within the firm so that they're not working on the projects that come forward. And if there's a chance that they are working on them, they recuse themselves from the discussion.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Michael?
We're talking about, they're all with RFM Architects. Right?
And so these are both reappointments.
Yeah.
And at the time, only one of them worked for RFM
Yeah.
and one switched. I can't remember.
The comment I want to bring up about RFM is they're a certified B Corp. A B Corp, it like does a lot of work to basically demonstrate their commitment to the communities they work in and things like that. So it would be part of that they would be involved more so than possibly another company. B Corps are really fascinating if you ever get a chance to look into them. So.
All right, so how do we feel on this item?
Consent.
Consent it is. Similarly, we also have to confirm the appointment of Aaron Hatch to the design review. The application is in the packet. Mayor?
Same comments, all of them.
I have a general question on the design review board. Andrea, maybe you're the best one to answer this. Are all members of the design review board members of the same architectural firm? Okay. All right. How many are on the board?
There's five.
There's five. And
Just
how many?
these two is RFM. And then
Okay.
there's a builder, a landscape architect, and I'm sorry, I can't remember.
No worries. So that helps, I think, alleviate maybe some people's concern because a majority are not. Okay, very good. All right, how do we want to treat this item?
Consent.
Consented, Mayor.
You're welcome.
And as I mentioned, we're going to move the Sixth Street discussion as we agree to the end of the agenda bill briefing. So the next one is the authorization to pre-purchase materials for the Central Bremerton Forest Main project. And with us tonight, Mr. David Powell. Mr. Powell.
Good evening. So this agenda bill is for the pre-purchase of long lead time materials for the Central Bremerton Forest Main. I spoke with the Public Works Committee Monday about this project. As you know, we have a grant that's going to pay for the construction of this project, a little over $7 million. It has a schedule associated with it that we have to have this project completed on or before February 28th, 2026. That's predicated upon starting construction in August and working through the project. In our due diligence of looking at managing this grant, we went and asked suppliers about the fittings. There are a lot of times long lead time materials for these kinds of projects. Sure enough, some of them are out as far as 18 weeks to acquire. So if we have the contractor acquire order the fittings, they will be not delivered to the middle of November, which puts our project grant at risk because we won't be able to get the project done until sometime mid next year. So what we have done is put together a pre-purchase specification. Melinda has helped us put together the draft, and then John and Michael have gone through it with us. We have gotten input from the designers for what fittings are required. and put that into the request for bids, and we're ready to send that out. But it is between $200,000 and $300,000, and where that cost comes from is we did go to HD Fowler, which is a local supplier of materials, and asked them for a quote, and they provided that, along with the caveat that these are way out in terms of time for acquisition. So this would go out under a small works roster advertisement. Companies like Ferguson Waterworks and HD Fowler will be solicited for this project. We want to get this out as quickly as possible. Opening bids the 11th of April, so it doesn't give them much time to get their quotes to us, and then get them under contract as soon as possible. Because of the quick timeline, we haven't been able to follow the normal process of getting going through City Council, so that's why we're kind of pushing it into Public Works Committee, and now we're here before you. So our motion is to authorize the mayor to approve the pre-purchase materials for the Central Bremerton Force Main Replacement Project, the amount of not to exceed $300,000.
Okay, so we'll start with our chair of Public Works.
I think it's great. I'm glad that they caught that it was going to be that long of a lead time. So I have absolutely no problem with this. I think it's a really good thing that you're doing this.
Great, thank you.
I'll just say, yeah, and Jane especially asked some really good questions, and essentially what's the risk of doing it? And if I understand, the only risk is if the city were to accidentally purchase the wrong fittings, but it sounds like there are a lot of great controls in place to make sure that doesn't happen. Mm-hmm. Mr. Powell is on it.
Right, we've checked it inside and out, and we're confident that we're ordering the correct materials. It's just a matter of can the contractor that's supplying materials perform to get us the materials on time. That's the risk we run.
Mr. Powell, my question then is, how does this equate, as a homeowner, if I went to a roofer and said, I'm going to supply the roofing materials, I want you to install the roof, they'd be like, okay, I'm not giving you any warranty on the roofing materials because I'm not purchasing it. So in your world, are any of the contractors that are going to bidding on this going to say, oh, by the way, you're providing those fittings, so I'm not providing any warranty? How's this going to work? Has the city done this before?
I'm not sure if the city has done this before. I've done this before in previous employment. The specifications, we tell the contractor that we're going to repurchase these materials and what those materials are. And they have to agree to accept those materials as part of the contract. So it's not like, they can't say, well, we didn't order that, so we're not going to warranty it or something like that. They have to acknowledge that as part of their bid package when they sign the bid.
Okay, so they'll see the specs of what has been purchased by the city. And these fittings are, again, just my own, I go to a big box store, it's going to be a certain brand, Fernco or whatever it is.
Could be 4 trips.
Oh, yeah. So
Right.
these aren't custom made fittings. I mean, they're industrial, and that's why you're going out to bid on this, but does that make sense?
Yes, they're 18-inch fittings, so they're not off the shelf. The Buy American requirements, because of the grant, makes it a little more challenging in getting these fittings. They're metal, they're nickel iron, so they have to supply a material origin certification with the fittings, which adds more time to it.
Right.
But they are specialized fittings. The valves, for instance, the 18-inch valve is out 18 weeks. But fortunately, the 18-inch valve is at the end of the project. So the 14-inch valve is out like 12 weeks, which is right at the front of the project. So I'm not sure I'm answering your question fully.
Yeah, Dave, I want to mention also their specialty line too. They have a special line for sewage. So it takes longer to get it for that reason too.
Right.
It's not cement coated, it's got a special box on it.
1 second, Jane, I'll get you. Tom, you're confident, obviously, you're endorsing this procedure. All right.
This is the right approach. We've done repurchases before. Engineering being very proactive on this.
Right.
The contractors, in his specifications, he's accepting the materials, they're standard design, but they don't have shelf, they don't have these on the shelf. 100%.
Okay, Jane.
So one thing, I mean, these types of fittings, they are so over tested before they're even shipped. So it's not like buying a ceiling lamp, they go through rigorous testing prior to them leaving the factory.
Right. So, okay, Jennifer.
10.8, the project is funded by a federal grant by American Requirement Supply. And so it just kind of, you're endorsing it, everybody's fine with it. I just want to kind of check in on this. Is it cost effective we have to receive this grant, and also there are options in America for American made.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's a free force.
Okay. All right. I think I need to be educated a little more on this. This is I'm going to educate myself on this. Thank you for your time.
Okay.
You can
No other
talk about
questions?
the Copy.
How do we want to treat this item?
Consent.
Yeah.
Consent it is.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Powell.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Monroe is going to be here for the next two items. First item is the interlocal contract with Houston Galveston Area Council, HGAC, for cooperative purchasing. Ms. Monroe.
Is that the next one? I thought the traffic safety.
So,
Right.
so it's going to be, if we follow, it's item A5.
Oh, okay. I went too far. Sorry.
How you doing? Everything's still working? Do you have a commission? Okay.
Participants. Yeah,
Make it cool.
stick window. And then. I will- No, she's already has a
Oh,
role
yeah, you
as,
should.
Well,
I think Hans got to work his magic.
When you are you not? Do you have the option to share screen?
Oh, there it is. I just want to share.
It said promote to attendee and not panelist.
no, she's good.
Okay.
She is.
Thank you so much for patience.
No worries.
Up there. So the Houston Galveston Area Council Purchasing Cooperative is a new purchasing cooperative for the city. We are looking at there's a CCTV installation, new purchase. It has been at least about 10 years since we purchased one of these, a little bit beyond their life. So it is time. And this is a purchasing cooperative that is used extensively across Washington state. It meets all of our legal requirements to purchase and issue solicitations and promote competition. You'll see I am sharing their website right now because it provides information regarding the number of suppliers and products that they provide. And also I want to just share their categories as well as familiar. You just share this page with you if you wanted to look at it yourself at some point. So over here left, you'll see the cursor there. These are the types of purchases that we would make from this purchasing cooperative. And it really would be from a large manufacturer for the type of item that we cannot get locally, that we are not going to find a competitive result from a local solicitation issued on our own. So this format tracks large contractors, large manufacturers, so we can get a great price on a CCTV product, but many of those same manufacturers are selling to dealers. Yeah, selling to dealers that are local. So it ends up like Hughes Northwest is a local dealership. There are many local, there are a few local manufacturers actually on here. Walking First, a local manufacturer. They're on this contract. But there are lots of local dealers, and that's what we're going to find mostly in our community. Local dealers that are able to use this to provide supplies in the areas that we are, going to be looking at for this strategically. It definitely isn't. It's certainly not going to replace our RFP process, our ITD process, but it's just sort of an additional tool to have. And I find it especially useful right now. Some of these contracts have been issued several years ago, and they go out several years. So we've locked in pricing on these contracts, and they're blanket contracts. So we can make multiple purchases off. So there really is a benefit. Like I said, it does not replace our processes, does not replace MRSC. It's really just another tool in the tool belt. So we have a variety of purchasing pockets that we have right now. Sourcewell, HVAC, well, if added. TIPS is one we just recently added. And we regularly use the Washington State DVS contract, and that has most of our other large Washington State suppliers. So we really use that one most heavily when we are using those purchasing. But this has some really unique products in it, their communications equipment and emergency equipment supplies, as well as their emergency vehicles. So there's some great opportunities and pricing to this purchasing cooperative, and used widely across the state in the same way, just a strategic purchasing tool as in tool belt. I think that's a good choice to make at this time.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Did this go before a committee?
Yep. So, are there any downsides to this?
It really are not. I think that right now, that looking at this, we don't have to use it. It's really just if we find it to be a benefit. And usually the way that comes to us is we are working with a local dealer or supplier, and we say, well, we would love to buy from you, but we need to, issue a public solicitation. Are you a member of any purchasing cooperatives? Then we can go out and look at that and decide if it's really competitive pricing. And that's really, kind of the benefit to that.
Yeah.
We aren't going to be using it, too often. It's when we really are finding, like this system is one that I would say is a good strategic buy off of here. But there are other items off of here that what I've started doing is, I'll get notices from these groups that say, hey, we've just added this purchasing category, we've just awarded this contract. And I might share that with departments to just say, hey, if you're thinking in the next 2 years that you need to replace or purchase this item, this is a potential option for you just to look at as you're planning your budget. And sometimes the answer is we still want to go out for RFP. Sometimes they don't have what we need on here. It's like, oh, that's the same item, but it's not the right specs, not the right delivery. It doesn't always result in overages, but it doesn't hurt to have it there. And it's just, we don't, there's no fees. So.
My understanding is that the sewer camera truck, when we priced it out from this our standard way and this, it was a substantial savings. And basically we're getting it from the same person.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Same local dealer, about price.
Yeah.
I don't see any other questions or concerns. How do we want to treat this item?
Consent.
Consent it is. Ms. Monroe, you have the next item, which is the service agreement with Nova Global Incorporated for automated traffic safety program. Go ahead, please.
Have a PowerPoint. Actually, am going to stop and introduce Heidi Traverso. And she's been working with us. And I'm gonna just give a little intro to how we arrived here this evening, and then Heidi has some information she can share with you.
So we have a council member that's attending remote. Sometimes I see her trying to, so if we can just project her voice a little louder, I'd be appreciated.
Sure, thank you so much. Our automated traffic safety camera update evening for you. So in 2008, we purchased, entered into agreement and installed 9 automated traffic enforcement cameras across the city. And in skipping ahead across quite a lot of discussion and other items, to May of 2022, we issued an RFI just in order to research the current market conditions. We were coming out of COVID at that time, and new changes in other local jurisdictions. The outcome from that RFI was to renew again as an option with the current agreement and maintain our current pricing, our current system. During that time, and in June of 2024, there was complete legislative overhaul of the RCW, and we now have an entirely new RCW, 466020. There were a lot of changes. Most of them do not impact us because we have what is considered a legacy system that was installed prior to 2012. So one of the changes that I think you all might appreciate is that this RCW includes an equity allowance, and it allows for a 50% reduction in fines for a violator if they qualify. They can request that from the court. In addition, this RCW allows for the use of park safety zones and school speed zones if you'd like to expand into those areas. So I'm just keeping this cutting to the chase here. After reviewing this proposal from Nova Global, we feel that this really is the best outcome, a pivot to a new vendor. In the last several years, we have noted that our system, our equipment is outdated, our locations need new analysis. And in order to do that under the current contract, current vendor, or even if we went out and issued a new RFP, we would certainly end up with an increase. So utilizing a 2022 RFP that was issued by the city of Everett, we end up with the current pricing that was reflected in actually matched my RFI outcomes. I was not supposed to find that. With a contractor that is proven in the state of Washington. We have several local cities that have moved over to Nova Global, City of Fife, City of Tacoma, with you.
So you're a state company, a Washington state company?
No, we are a Florida company, but I live here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there actually are no contractors that are within the state of Washington that provide the system, but they are proven through the Washington state courts. So they have worked with our state court system, which is really important. I know from firsthand experience that it's a complicated system. So if you don't have experience in our court system, and especially right now, changes that have occurred and will continue to occur, I'm going to be concerned. But they have had proven experience in that and updated systems and analysis that really will provide us more data than we've had in the past on a really old system. And I'm going to let Heidi talk about that a little more. She's really expert in that area. But I think this contract update to RCW allow us to move into the future. You know what, actually, they don't see that up there. I know, that always confused.
Oh, I just can't start it from the, I just can't access the.
Oh,
start from
yeah,
the
it is,
beginning. So I kind of made this very topical since you all have had photo enforcement for quite some time. I'm formally retired from the Seattle Police Department as a sworn officer, and that's how I kind of come into this line of work. We have about 11 contracts in the state, in Oregon and across the country and internationally. And I just want to kind of walk you through what it would look like for your city to transition from your current vendor to our system. So by signing a contract with us, it allows us, gives us permission to begin all of the background work, and these are the steps that we would take to begin that process. The goal here is to minimize the downtime between vendors, because that is a time when there are no violations being issued, intersections are not being monitored. So the goal would be to minimize that transition time. For Tacoma, it was about 2 weeks. For Fife, it was about 1 week, and they had the prior vendor that you all now. And we do that by doing all of the back end work, by all of the permitting and process for the engineering, the sites. We do all of the violation updates, the notices, any warnings. If you're doing new sites, we'll do studies. If there's intersections that need to be reevaluated or new ones to be evaluated, we do it during this time. You already have most of the signage up. We would just verify that the signage is, I believe you own that, but we just make sure that all of the existing infrastructure is compliant with state law. And then when that contract ends with your current vendor, you can opt to either do a month to month if you're not ready with AOC. For example, AOC is administration of the courts. They approve all of the violations for every city in this program, and lately they've had a little bit of a delay. So once we know that your system, we have all of the background work done and we're ready to go, then once your contract ends, your current vendor will remove their equipment and we will come in and either install new poles and new power and replace the system, or just use the same infrastructure poles and power and add our cameras like we did in Tacoma. These are just part of all of the background work. I'm not going to bore you with all of that stuff, but we do all the notices, the integrations during this next 2 to 3 months, getting everything set up, working with your public works. Our contractor already works with the city of Bremerton and is familiar with the roadways and your department heads. We would be doing all the integrations with your payment services, your end port, all of the background, and then do testing. That's the unit there in the picture. That's all of it, except for the flash, which is a minimal LED. This is the quality of the photos. This is a school zone photo in Tacoma. Just kind of wanting to show that the green line and the 2 photos to the far right are virtual. That just shows that the vehicle is tracking. So we don't rely just on radar. We do 3 different types of measurements to make sure that vehicle is actually exceeding the speed limit. And none of the systems do we disrupt the roadway. It's all video analytics. This kind of technology has really taken off in years of late, in the last decade. So it's all virtual now. It's all video analytics. This is the officer's approval review screen, and what this shows, and I just need to come up here and explain this. I know this is hard for people not seeing this, but this is what the officer sees when he or she pulls up the violation for review. They're going to match this plate with the return from the DMV that we've supplied.
Once they do that, they match the plate, they can watch the video. If it's a red light violation, they can see up here, there's a data bar that will tell them how long is the amber time, 3.5 seconds. And then how long was it red before the vehicle entered the intersection. All the measurements, everything is up here, including the speed, the lane of travel. This is what we call the data bar here, and it's completely customizable to whatever your city police department or courts would like to see. If it actually is a violation, the officer puts approve, it's gone. If they reject it because it doesn't meet their criteria for whatever reason, reject. It's done. Then the next one pops up. It's extremely efficient. If there is a concern, like it's an ambulance, or for transparency and clarity, because if you get a public records request, we want to show that every single violation that wasn't accepted has a reason code. And what is it? So that would go into review. A supervisor takes a look at that and makes a determination. Any questions on that process? Or what included? Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead.
Thank you. The option for biometrics, does the officer have that? Is it captured?
What do you mean biometrics?
Visual.
Oh, it's illegal in the state to have a
Good answer.
photo of the driver.
You already knew that,
Yeah.
but there's not an option that, there's not an option for them to select that because it is illegal, but.
And the photos are always taken from behind.
Okay, all right. And then this, I'm gonna hold my other question.
Okay.
Thank you.
So that's basically what the process would be for your police department. This is just an example of it, of the data bar close up. So the amber time, the duration of red before the vehicle entered the intersection. Never, ever is it entering on yellow. It doesn't start the clock until the light is red. And of course we have signage because we're not about to trick drivers.
So can you repeat that? If they're, I know anecdotally the yellow has been increased, time for the yellow. So if somebody enters at the end of the amber light and it turns red while they're in the middle of the intersection, they get a ticket?
No.
That's your criterion. I mean, that would be the criteria for this city, is that the duration, the amber phase has absolutely ended, and it will be visible in the photo. It has, so those photos that we saw, when it's a red light photo, there's a photo of them behind the stop line, it's red, and in the intersection, it's red.
Okay.
Never will it be a yellow.
Okay. And are we ready for more questions or
This letter, sure.
Oh, okay. And then this is what the notice of violations look like. This happens to be the city of Tukwila. And what's notable about this is that we have a QR code now. That if a citizen wants to review their violation when they've got their notice, they can just tap that QR code, look at it, watch the video. The same two pictures that are taken of the violation in a short 10 to 12 second video that the officer reviewed is exactly the same evidence that the citizen reviews, and becomes the exact same evidence that goes to court when they choose to go to a hearing. It's all exactly the same photographs and video.
Nice.
But if you don't have a smartphone, I mean, my dad could never navigate a QR code like that. There's options, right? Getting in the menus.
You can still go in and see it.
Yeah,
the
you can go
clerk's
in.
office.
Yes.
Or what have you. Okay.
Do they have that option here? Yeah. So, and if they don't have a kiosk here, we offer the option to have a kiosk so that if someone's going to court, they have the option of reading, at the kiosk, and we don't charge for it. And then there's all the instructions, and now there's the new equity law that if you are on state assistance or participate in the Women's, Children, and Infants program, you are eligible for a 50% reduction in that violation. Yeah, and there are other equity considerations in the new law as well for placement of new systems.
Side note, is our code adjusted for that? Does it have to be? Okay. Sorry.
So if they log in to our system, if this is what the citizen will see, they're going to enter from the letter that they received, the notification, their license plate number, and the PIN code. And then they're presented with the evidence and the options on what to do. The options are completely customizable. In fact, this one lacks the FAQs, which I would include, but things like, they want to see what is the refund policy? What does it mean what does a declaration of non-responsibility mean? If I want to request a court hearing, what's next? So they can click around in this back and forth to choose the option that they want to select. But you can see here, this is the speed camera at Bay Street in Tacoma. There's an added image here. You wouldn't for the red light, you just have the 3. I know what it's the close-up. So they can check the video, they can zoom in to see the plate, and watch the video and review any kind of payment instructions from that screen. But these are some of the other options. If we don't have a community service program in the state, we also don't have a driver diversion because it's civil. It doesn't go on your driving record. It doesn't affect your insurance. It can go to collections. Part of the new law is that if you have, so in Tacoma, we have a lot of drivers who have like 10 or more violations. And that's because they're on the base. They have an Arkansas plate, but they live here and the notices are going to Arkansas.
Oh.
Right. So that doesn't count against them, but when they go to renew or license that vehicle, if there's the state now has a new program where if you haven't addressed a violation in 150 days, then you'll get to talk to the folks at the tabs when you get your tabs, your licensing, and they'll let you know that you have some stuff to take care of with the courts.
What if they keep it in Arkansas?
Say what?
What if they keep it registered in
They
Arkansas?
still gotta pay.
Oh.
Or they may not have to pay, they still have to address those violations.
Or it goes to collections. I mean, eventually they'll.
It can go to corrections, but I think there's a process where the judge has some discretion to say, these have gone 6 months, and your city can decide how you want to handle that. We can send them to collections, or actually your courts make that decision on how they want to handle it. They probably have a process for that right now already. We would just adhere to that process, whatever that is. But it's very clickable, and that's the whole thing. So it's very straightforward for citizens. What we'd like to do is, when I looked at some of the data from your intersections currently, there's a few that we'd like to restudy and see if those volumes are truly that low, and if that intersection needs to be reevaluated for movement or just elimination.
Right.
The goal here isn't to make money. It's
Right.
So if we come in and you only have 6 systems, then just get to 6 systems that make sense.
Okay, good. Open up for questions. Jane, go ahead.
So how much does it cost to add locations?
It doesn't.
It doesn't cost.
There's no cost for studies. There's no cost for the new locations. You only pay when the systems become active. So let's just say that you have a school zone, you identify a school and you say, I want to put in 2 school zone cameras. We'd study it, get the data. Yes, it makes sense. Here's what that looks like. And then we would do 30 days of warnings, new signage, help it with the community outreach on your website so that you want to blast that information out.
Mm-hmm.
And then once people start paying is when you start paying. Once the paid violations, in the contract, it says that we cannot receive payment from any other source other than revenue from this program.
So this question's more for you, Melinda. How are we income neutral now? Are we making a little bit of money off of it?
We are income neutral by the skin of our teeth, but we do have operations. So I would say this is the first year. Last year we were truly, income neutral, including operations, and this year we were not. And I think, we think that is related to the system being very old. These locations really need an analysis.
Yeah, there's a lot of speeding and running red lights in town.
There's, this contract actually offers up to 12. We can simply just replace the current 9 that we have, or, less than that, if that's what the, analysis, allows. So we have just 12 in status. We can add on this school speed zones and park zones. If that's kind of like the next phase.
The Warren Avenue Bridge. There's a park on either end.
On either end, yeah.
Yeah, we just need to be, we just need to be within 300 feet of a park boundary for the park zone. We're doing a number of park zones now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Jeff and Denise.
No, excellent presentation and much appreciated. And just one due diligence question, and apologies, Melinda, you kind of covered this at the start. So, but Google and there's 2 other kind of major companies is Vera Mobility and looks like Census Gatso Group that's used in Washington. So walk me through again what the selection process was for Novoa Global, and then why should we go with Novoa Global over those 2?
So Vera Mobility truly is red.
Okay.
So that's out. And Census.
It's actually Census America, and that's our old business.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So there's only 2 companies?
Yeah, there's only 2 companies. We were Census America, but because there's a Census Gatso, that's an overseas company, we decided to rebrand with a different horrible name. Different name, and so I don't think there's any other vendors in this state other than Vera and us.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. I remember the old adage about when the Chevy Nova was advertised in Hispanic countries, it did not sell well because it was Nova, no go. So Glow kind of, but it kind of works here. It's, hey, slow down, don't go so fast.
Actually, can we close the presentation?
Oh, yes.
And then Denise, go ahead, you have the floor.
Yeah, I just have a question. I think we talked about this in committee, but if it ever does start producing income, where does the money go? Where do we have it budgeted to go if and when it starts?
Go into transportation.
Okay. Not public safety, even though they're breaking the law.
We could change it.
We can change that.
We can change that? Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's just, I'm not weighing in on either end, but I think it's really important that we start taking a look at these things, even though this is revenue neutral. Any income, to start delegating it to, attributing it to the budget of it just seems more in alignment. That's all.
Go ahead, Kylie.
So the city attorney's office is going to be doing a presentation to the public safety committee soon about revenue from cameras, because there are restrictions at the state level about where the money can go. And it's kind of broken down by new cameras, old cameras, that sort of thing. You heard part of the presentation. Speed cameras are new, and there's different rules about that versus red light, which are old. So we'll be breaking that down for you to take a
Great. Thank you, Kylie.
The new zones.
The new zones are treated differently than the old.
Okay, thank you.
But you're very fortunate because you can direct your revenue. You're as a legacy city, you're not required to put all of your revenue like new cities are now, new contracts now. Everything has to be allocated and recorded for traffic improvement projects. You kind of sounds like you already do that, but
Right. So we have some stuff, but we have some flexibility because we had a program, and so we're going to be breaking that down. So we might be able to, if we added new cameras, those could go. It might be required to go to transportation under new state law, but we could maybe at the same time have
the old
the
cameras. Go
zoning
back.
would maybe go in a different direction. So we're going to be talking about that more. I don't want to.
Yeah.
I don't want to get
it's a big one.
spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Well, you just generated like 25 minute questions.
Not.
I'll hold them. I will hold them.
Denise, you still have the floor.
You're muted.
You're muted, Denise.
That's because I was done. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jennifer.
Oh, sorry. You're doing some clarifying questioning. I'm sorry to interrupt. Oh gosh, sorry. Okay. So one of the things I've noticed, happens with the red light cameras is they randomly flash, at intersections. Do you know what that's about? Can you explain that to me? And is that go ahead.
So we do have an older system. Some of our locations have in-ground sensors and a radar system. And you're sometimes going to experience that flash, and then it doesn't result in a citation. Or, maybe it will. There was an issue there. And you're going to maybe just see those happen. I'll just say that, I think we'd have to know the exact situation. There's a lot of reasons. So I can't tell you a definite answer, but I do know that the system is old and it just doesn't have the precision that this new system has. She's talking about, some of the lines that you can put in place, within the.
I've heard it from other municipalities, but we don't have those kind of misfires. I don't know if it's
a misfire. I'm always a little concerned about additional data being collected of folks. And whatever, I mean, we're in a public space, but it is curious. I am curious what it is, if it's a misfire, if it's, or if that data is collected, stored on random drivers who are following the law.
Melinda's watching.
Well,
What if she is? No, she does not have that kind of time.
And maybe in that presentation with your city attorney, it would be great to go over the retention laws, because we we adhere very strictly to the retention laws in each state that we work in, and
We're really strict with them.
they're very strict.
Thank you.
And the photos collected cannot be used for any other purpose,
Right.
other than the violation at hand.
I mean, they can be subpoenaed if there's a crime, or if there's no.
Can't submit them
It's
for a film
pretty
festival.
strict.
Having an idea.
We've been able to do that in Tacoma, but by and large,
They can't be subpoenaed for, okay. All right, I'm gonna move off of this subject.
That's pretty crazy.
But let's save it, because that's a whole other can of worms, not germane to this topic. I really love the idea about analysis, because that's what we've been asking for, right? Like, where's the real data? Because the data we've been getting is kind of convoluted. It includes other municipalities, jurisdictions, et cetera. And so when you run an analysis for our area, can you explain to me what that looks like? How the data is collected and sourced for an analysis of efficiency of a specific site?
So for two different sites. So for a speed site, we use a piece of equipment that is an engineering tool made in Texas, not our own equipment. We don't use our own equipment to do any of the testing.
Okay.
And so it is basically a bidirectional radar that captures the volume and the speeds of all passing traffic. And then I'll sort that into speed tables to let you see how the traffic is flowing through that area. So if during the hour before school or whatever your flashing beacons are, if you have flashing beacons in your school zone, for example, we would just take those small windows of time when people are supposed to reduce their speed to 20. And are they, and if they're not, what are they going? And let you see how many violations. For red light, we videotape from behind and count every single vehicle for 16 hours. It's standard in the industry for the video to be 16 hours. And then we count each lane, each violation for each lane, and then report that back.
Thank you.
So the public, I can look at that info?
Not generally, because it's still from the camera from behind, but we can count lanes.
But is that information able to be disclosed? Sorry.
Pardon me. Yeah.
Generally, it's never been asked. We don't keep it. The videotape is part of the retention laws that we have to be a part of. So once we put it into a format where it's just a count, then those videos are no longer kept.
Okay. So it's not public record because
we don't keep it.
Okay.
Yeah. Once the study is done, there's no reason to keep it. The only reason
I imagine it'd be a lot of
for pretty limited time is because sometimes, we've had someone from the public or a council say, well, I don't necessarily believe that your numbers are accurate.
Okay.
So then I can, with the speed tables, I just present like your 400 captures of speeds every second that we have the thing out there. And
Thank you.
Every single reading there.
What I really appreciated is the conversation, the short mention of that, we're not here to make money off of this, we're here to deter an action. And I really appreciated that because, I mean, you guys know how I feel about this kind of revenue generation. It's regressive. However, it has been proven to be a deterrent in some ways. I really love the idea of us getting actual data specific to our municipality on that.
It's also such a great force multiplier for your officers. So it's like a net, right? And everybody, it's going to be impossible for an officer to be at every location, but you have these nets where officers can ultimately review that violation, but can be out in the community doing other things. And I don't know really of a jurisdiction in this state right now that is fully staffed. I mean,
have one last-
it's desperate for bodies, and this allows, you can do these off duty, you log in at any time from your vehicle or from the precinct, and they can review at any time.
And so I guess I'm gonna hold my questions in case anybody else wants some time. I don't have any more right now.
Okay.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions, concerns? How do we want to treat this item?
I think it should be on general, because
Yeah.
I think there might be some members of the public who wanna.
This has been an issue of importance in the past, hasn't it been? One of the longest study sessions I ever saw.
I mean, we could put it on consent and then people can.
You're changing one proprietor for the other, but I'm leaving it up to council. If you want to do, I mean, you're just changing one vendor to the other with arguably a quote unquote better system, but the cameras are gonna be at the same location when we switch over. So, but it's whatever you guys want to do. If one person wants to take general business, that's okay.
I'm good for general business.
Okay, that's all we need. No more discussion.
Thank you.
General business. Thank you. Hey, so I had a council member ask if we could take a break after
Yes.
this. I think it's a good idea.
Stretch break.
So it's 6:37.
Yeah.
If you want to get some fresh air or whatnot, I give you at 6. Coming back at 6:48 sharp. Thank you.
6:48.
Okay, if I pressed all the buttons correctly, we're back in session. Next item up tonight, I'd like to welcome Nelson here for items A7 and A8. Item A7 is the approval of the collective bargaining agreement in the city of Bremerton and Teamsters Local 589. Approval of management, professional employee salary schedule, and related budget. Ms. Nelson, you have the floor.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen. I have a summary of the Teamsters. So the Teamsters contract. So here to get a for 2025, it's a 6% cost of living increase. That's actually split out between the cost of living and the market adjustment. 2026 is 100% of CPIW, minimum 2%, maximum 4%. 2027 is also 100% CPIW, minimum 2, maximum 4%. We increased the amount of hours they can make in their comp time bank from 40 to 80 hours. But we also reduced the carryover from 40 to 20 hours. And we added one vacation tier that will start at year 3 that gives them an extra day of vacation at the end of the year. And that one won't start until we ratify the contract. We got ability to negotiate front-loaded leave. Vacation is a maximum 80 hours, sick leave maximum 40 hours. And that is hopefully going to help us attract more qualified applicants. And then we increased reimbursement for safety shoes from 200 to 275 and increased mechanic tool allowance from 600 to 700 a year. That is the majority of the changes. There are some language changes that were designed. I didn't wonder if there's so many, but to make it easier for the employees to understand, they were having trouble understanding how some of the work. So it was just clarifying the language.
Okay. And do we have any questions? I do. Jane, go ahead.
So how do we go about adjusting the person who's making $20 an hour gets $1.20 raise, but the person who's making $85 an hour gets a substantial raise, and so that keeps spreading? And how do you go about readjusting so that the lower paid employees are not being underpaid over, course of several contracts?
That percentages are there to keep them from spreading by having everybody get the same cost of living. But it looks like, so it's not the same dollar amount, but it's the same 6% increase. But if we think they're falling behind, that's when we discuss salary survey, or the union will request an increase during negotiation.
Okay. So do we do desk audits often?
Not lately. We did over the last 4 years. I've probably done about at least.
Okay. And then when you're doing that desk audit, you're looking at what other municipalities are paying. Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. That's it.
Okay, Jennifer.
How was this $2 million budgetary adjustment accounted for or planned for? Just wondering, we're facing some budget shortfalls. We already knew this was coming, and I'm pretty sure Mike Riley is there to answer this question. I knew you were there, buddy. All right.
I was ready for you. So we had carryover, we had set asides, roughly about $1 million that was set. So this will have $1 million budget impact that we'll have to address. So.
And what does that mean?
So as we reevaluate going into the next budget, this will have an impact to what our bottom line will look like. There's $1 million impact that was not forecasted and set aside. So
Well, our budget's set. So when do we address this?
when we look at 26, we'll be looking at wages and what we predicted for 26, and we're making in September when the council sees they get a chance to reconfirm the 26 budget. We'll be addressing it there. We'll also be taking a look at it during the mid-year.
Mid biennium budget adjustment.
Mid-biennium budget
The
adjustment.
mid-biennium adjustment. Yeah, we'll reconfirm the budget. So there might be.
Would you have any
we'll be looking
ideas
at-
on where,
Oh, go ahead.
what are your ideas? I mean, you have to have ideas because this is how you work, Mike. You do this well. Do you have any ideas of where we're going to be shaving this from? $1 million.
Not shaving. There's a lot of work to go through that. We are looking at a revenue forecast where we materialized in 2024 with our reserves. So it came in stronger than our forecast, what we were expecting. So that's we're kind of anticipating that. And then
Reserves
looking.
came in stronger than your forecast. Which reserves? Is there a particular? Sorry, I
No,
appreciate.
it's just
I
our
gotta make sure.
ending fund balance estimates that we had projected for the budget. We had what we thought we would end at for ending fund balance that came in higher than we had anticipated. Just that's based on savings and vacancies and what we didn't spend. So once we have that trued up, and we'll be talking with the finance committee in April what those numbers look like. We have departments right now looking at their budgets, trying to find savings, looking at spend. There's a few things we'll need to do. We talked during labor negotiations that affordability is paramount for us, but doesn't always drive the decisions of where we land on these. So we're looking at revenue forecasts where we're landing right now. We're still trending within within budget, slightly above. But costs are still high. So don't want to say too much too early, but we're watching everything very, very closely, and we're making recommendations to the council of where we need to course correct.
Okay, I guess my understanding was that the revenue forecasts were not trending.
No, they're still trending in a positive direction, but they're not keeping up with our costs. That's been the discussion for the last more than 3 to 5 years that we've seen costs are outpacing our revenue growth.
When we get into a situation where we're $1 million short, maybe we can even scale it down to 500. And this is just prior experience watching us go through this with the bridge, right? And trying to figure out how we're going to afford everything. I just want some assurance that this isn't going to have an impact on our current FTEs, on our current salaried employees or hourly employees.
Currently, right now, we don't have plans that we're implementing furloughs or any other discussion, but we're watching everything closely.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Jeff?
I just wanted to say, I'm really glad we were able to land for the out years that I now believe our 3 contracts are roughly similar on the amount of wage increases on cost of living in the out years of those contracts now. Yeah, so kind of all our employees across the city are now treated equally in terms of their cost of living adjustment. I'm glad a place we were able to land.
Right. So for people that are listening in, this isn't, we can't talk about what had occurred, but this isn't the first time we've seen this. We've been involved in negotiations with the council and exempt sessions, and we're not making that discussion public. Given that, and that this is a proposal and it's been approved by the Teamsters, how does the council want to treat this item? General business?
Consent?
Yeah.
Okay. Consent it is. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Charlotte.
And then
Charlotte, thanks, Riley.
the next item, Ms. Nelson, is also on your plate, the review and approval of the Director of Public Works and Utilities job description, which is item AA.
Okay, so since we have a vacancy coming up, we went through and reviewed the job description, and I sat down with President Younger and Councilmember Coughlin and Councilmember Revelowski, and we went through and created this updated version of the job description. I'm hoping you guys have had a chance to read it, and if you have questions, I'm here to answer.
Okay, do we have any questions from any of the council members, or is this good as is? Jeff?
Just a kudos to you, Eric, for leading the discussion with Jane and I and Charlotte. For the other council members, or I should say, Charlotte found a lot of great examples of public works directors from, I'm going to say we had almost 10 different cities across Washington. And we went through all of them and read through them, and things that we thought, oh yes, that's a great, either great wording or a great thing that we want to have in this job description. We kind of threw the kitchen sink back at Charlotte, who was able to distill it down to this, which is fantastic. So we really try to do comparisons on all the other cities and find out what's the things we weren't even thinking of. So anyway, that's how we landed, I think, where we are.
Right. Any questions or concerns from the rest of the council? How are we going to treat this item?
Consent?
Oh, go ahead, Denise.
Just, I was overall pleased, very pleased with the draft. I noticed we included, my favorite word, vision, in a lot of it as it came into detail. I would have liked to see more of that thrust in the general description right at the very beginning. Visionary leader, whatever. I think that all of our department heads, we should have that expectation of that it's not just a project by project type of management, but an overall vision for where the city's going. So I just personally would love to see more of that in that general description at the top of the page, as well as what you've done with the rest of it.
Well, if that's something that can be easily dovetailed in there, I think the rest of the council would be okay with that. Charlotte, if you can take Councilmember Fry's suggestion and for lack of a better term, sprinkle in what she said about the vision, maybe taking it from further down in there. Also a reminder that as part of the recruitment process is going through Prothman, and so that could be put in there as well, looking for a visionary leader. So Denise, is it a must-have, or are you good with this and we do it in the recruiting thing, or what's your preference?
I think that by putting it in that first part of it, sprinkling it in as much, that was the key issue for me. It's just a different type of leadership.
Okay. Jane?
I think what might work is the second paragraph be the first paragraph, and in that add more to having a vision for where you want to see the city go, because the second paragraph does have a lot of that general feeling that I think we're all trying to get across.
And or we can leave it in there, the order, because the central function is basically the first part descriptive and describes departments. But maybe Charlotte, on the second paragraph, you can work your magic about the visionary outlook and all that. And I believe, I trust in you that you'll be able to put the wordsmithing in and put it in the packet. If anybody has an issue with it, we can change it during
Yeah, I'm good with that. And I just think, again, and also in the recruitment, if that's included, you're just attracting a different level of leadership.
Well, Charlotte, if you want to mind making that change into the second paragraph, and then if anybody has a issue with it, please communicate with Charlotte directly when you see it in the packet. That's reasonable. So by Friday, is that okay?
Yep.
All right. So just a reminder, the next stage, and Charlotte, you correct me if I'm wrong, is this will go out on the recruitment, I believe, with Prothman. And Vice President Revelowski, Councilmember Coughlin, and myself have been contacted by the one of the Partners, I think, at Rothman.
He's the lead.
He's the lead for our input on specifically on, we're looking in for a public works director. So if you want to reach out to one of us, give us your input. I think we're okay with that without violating any. Anyway, the three of us were involved. No, the three of us were involved in the job description. And so we're going to be involved in the interview process, and then hopefully you trust us on that. And of course, I assume you'll be involved. The confirmation process.
Say it real quick and go to the order. While we're all here.
I'm assuming this interview process is gonna happen this year, right?
Well, yeah,
I would hope
Tom's
so.
leaving in.
What? Oh,
Charlotte, as
How
far
many
as
Mondays you got
timetable,
left, Tom?
what do we look?
Just checking the time.
We're not pressuring Mr. Nucky to go anywhere for the record, but Charlotte, as far as what you're understanding, what is the timetable?
As soon as we get this finalized, it's going out. I believe the Prothman has put up there, or he was going to, if he hasn't, he's real soon. It says coming soon. The day Bremerton's searching for. So it's kind of already out there, but as soon as this is done, they'll get it up and out.
What,
Go ahead, Jim.
when is the date, Tom? When is your date?
June 18th.
Okay, and then just in case we don't have anybody in place, do we have an interim? No, we don't have that decided.
Don't, but if it comes down to it, Hoffman does have some that they said are very qualified.
Okay, all right,
Just
thank
do
you.
interim work now.
Thank you.
Denise, go ahead.
I just have a quick question, Charlotte. I'm looking at Tom and knowing what situation he is in sitting there. I'm assuming that Tom also weighed in, maybe, or is that appropriate? You know, I kind of would appreciate getting, his blessing for this. But I don't know what the process usually is.
He hasn't, I didn't go over the final version with him, but he did put help with the version before you guys changed.
Exactly, just like we did with the legislative office manager, I asked Ms. Smith to take the first go run at it, and then
Good.
I have the same thing for Mr. Nucky to make the first go run at his job description. And then
Great.
he took-
Okay, thank you.
All right, so we decided that was consent. Thank you, Ms. Nelson.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And our last agenda item, last but not least, is the contract modification agreement number 2 with HDR Engineering Incorporated for the 6th Street Active Transportation Project. With us tonight is Mr. Nick Atayo. Welcome, Mr. Atayo.
Good evening, council. I think we've got a lot of folks watching online. Thanks for joining. Let me pull up the presentation. There we go. Councilor Fry, can you hear me okay?
I sure can. Thank you, Nick.
Okay, perfect. Well, again, Nick Atai, project manager. I've got about 8 informational slides. I wanted to maybe kind of recap some of the context in the project. It's going to be kind of helpful for the discussion on this specific item. So I would just, if at all possible, if you would let me kind of get through the information, and then we can kind of get into the discussion at the end. So this is for a contract modification with HDR Engineering. They are our consultant supporting our development of the 6th Street Active Transportation Project. So if you recall, I was here early January. I presented an information-only item, kind of reviewing the project scope, some of the goals of the project, the developed alternatives, and kind of a summary of the public input received. There's been some ongoing discussion with the Public Works Committee over the last few months as we've been working to develop this contract modification and advance the project from the concept phase to the final engineering. The contract amendment currently developed puts us in a great position to have the project shovel ready around this time next year. It's currently scheduled for the April 2nd, next week, council meeting. Just a reminder that we have been shortlisted for approximately $3 million in construction phase funding through the WashDOT pedestrian and bicycle program. So it's really exciting. That's a very very competitive program. Award notifications for that grant are expected June or July of this year. So what I'm trying to present on this slide is just kind of some background and context on the project, how this project came to be, right? So the project was originally visioned in 2007 as part of the non-motorized plan. So under that project, rechannelizing 6th Street was kind of visioned as an opportunity to take advantage of 6th Street having a little bit lower traffic volumes from Burwell and 11th. Fast forward to 2020 is when a lot of detailed analysis started happening. So in 2020, we performed a strategic road safety plan citywide. This analyzed crash data between 2014 and 2018 to identify trends and crash reduction strategies. 6th Street, the rechannelization project, was one of 5 priority projects. A total of 189 crashes were reported in the 5-year study period, with the majority of crash types being angle and rear end collisions. The rechannelization countermeasure strategy estimated a 29% crash reduction. That same year in 2020, the city completed a feasibility study evaluating rechannelization either on 6th Street or 11th Street with established performance targets, including safety, operations, and multimodal access. The study concluded 6th Street as being the priority corridor for rechannelization. The study reiterated the need to remove turning traffic from through lanes to address the high crash rates. It also recognized that long-range local and regional employment forecasts would likely create other necessary roadway improvements to manage operations and minimize cut-through traffic on local streets. Most recently, the City Council adopted the JCTP, which included significant outreach and even a specific outreach meeting in November of 2022 specific to this project. Ultimately, that plan included 6th Street rechannelization as a short-term priority project to include on-street bike lanes and rechannelization, including a center turn lane. JCTP was adopted December of 2023. So these plans and studies vary from a high-level vision to a detailed technical evaluation. Tremendous amount of time and effort goes into these plans and studies, and that's what we use as staff to establish the framework as these projects move forward. So just a real quick overview, roadway rechannelizations typically include a reduction or repurposing of vehicle lanes to improve safety and provide spaces for other users. There is just a tremendous amount of studies and research that have been done on these types of rechannelization projects. I've included some links in this presentation. For anyone watching online, there's a lot of great resources. These are just a few that kind of look at some of the before and after statistics for some of these similar rechannelizations. Some of the benefits are highlighted on this slide. Most notably are reduction in total crashes, average speeds, and when implemented with bike lanes, a significant reduction in vehicle-bicycle crashes. The current scope of the project is in alignment with a typical road rechannelization, which is a 4-lane with 3-lane rechannelization. There's not really readily available studies that document rechannelizations that would include a 4-lane to a 2-lane. So there's a huge gap in studies on those types of projects. Prior to developing HDR's current contract, when we met with the Public Works Committee, we discussed the need to right-size the scope of this project. This approach enabled us to balance the scope of the project. You can see on the screen here, this is the information that was provided, ranging from a very limited scope to an extensive scope. So we all know what scope creep is, and we all know what happens when you don't include enough scope to really push the needle or move the needle on a project with the goals and the outcomes. 6th Street is a very complex corridor, as we know. There's a lot of vehicles on the roadway, 13,000 vehicles a day west of Warren. The project spans multiple land uses, commercial, business, residential, and connecting the Charleston district to the downtown core. The project has nearly 150 access points outside of signalized intersections, including various driveways and minor intersections. Kitsap Transit has fixed route service on the corridor with nearly 20 transit stops and a gateway park and ride at Montgomery. There's 8 signalized intersections included in this project corridor, and the project is classified as a T3 freight route, which means that 300,000 to 4 million annual gross tons of freight move across the roadway. So why is this important? It's important because right sizing the scope simply means that we're trying to provide cost and impact conscious improvements to the maximum extent feasible, understanding that there are project constraints and several competing needs. That approach is grounded under the vision to improve safety for all road users. This slide shows an existing section of what we know 6th Street today, west of Park Avenue. Just highlighting a few of the kind of the goals and issues with the current conditions and what we're trying to resolve, right? So for pedestrians, there's currently a 5-foot wide sidewalk located immediately adjacent to the outside vehicle travel lanes with no buffer from adjacent traffic. Crossing distance across vehicle lanes spans the entire street width, which is around 44 feet. Visibility of pedestrians by vehicles can be impacted due to multiple travel lanes in each direction. For cyclists, there are no designated bicycle facilities. Cyclists riding in the street experience a high level of stress without designated facilities. And for vehicles have a high number of conflict points due to the multiple travel lanes and the lack of a dedicated left turn lane between intersections. This increases the risk for rear end angle collisions I mentioned earlier. Driver visibility of turning vehicles can be impacted due to multiple vehicle travel lanes. This is a similar section, kind of reflecting our current concept, right? Just from a high level of what we're proposing to achieve with this general section. So keep in mind, this is just a typical mid-block section. The bike lanes may or may not be buffered. That was all presented in the information we presented back in November. So as you can see in this concept for pedestrians, when the sidewalk is kind of intact in its current location, they now have a buffer with the bike lane in place, right? So they're not walking alongside vehicle traffic. Crossing distance across vehicle lanes is reduced by about 28%. The center two-way left turn lane provides an opportunity for hardened pedestrian refuge areas at specific crossings. And visibility of crossing pedestrians is improved as there's only one vehicle through lane in each direction. For cyclists, the reduction in vehicle lanes allows the incorporation of a 6-foot wide bike lane. Where determined viable, additional bike lane buffering and incorporation of vertical features can be incorporated, providing further separation or delineation between vehicles and bikes. Vehicles now have less conflict points. Left turning traffic is able to safely get out of the through lanes. Weaving traffic of vehicles is eliminated through lane reduction. Driver visibility of turning vehicles is improved due to only having one travel lane in each direction. Vehicle speeds are stabilized as drivers would not be able to pass slower moving vehicles in front of them. Emergency responders are able to utilize the center turn lane for emergency access. Ongoing road maintenance is able to be utilized through the center turn lane to divert traffic without having to have a very complicated, kind of stop and go situation. The current HDR contract included several kind of concept level tasks. Again, leveraging past project planning and public input prior to advancing into a formal engineering phase. The reason that we did this kind of two-step approach with HDR's contract is what really helps us at a staff level and our consultant is to have a really good understanding of what the scope is. So if we try to scope out the entire project front and we haven't had an opportunity to reach out to the public and kind of mold the project to suit the needs of what we're trying to achieve, then it becomes very challenging. So that's the reason that this was broke up into a separate concept phase. Again, this highlights some of the key tasks that were included in the current contract. To date, under the contract, the project's had 2 formal touch points with the community, each with an opportunity to provide feedback. Concept alternatives were presented at an in-person open house in November of last year. Due to the public input received to date, we have not finalized the concept design report, pending additional public outreach and concept refinement, which is included in this contract amendment. The developed HDR contract modification seeks to formalize this contract level design, advance the project to engineering level design, and seeks to have the project bid ready next year. Services under this contract modification are highlighted on this slide. The concept design refinement focuses exactly what it alludes to. It's refining the concepts considering the input that we received from the public. There's also been updates to some national guidance on development of bicycle facilities that may help influence some of the refinements that we're making. We're going to have a third opportunity for public input through an additional open house meeting, and we'll have continued coordination with impacted community partners such as Kitsap Transit. The majority of this amendment includes developing final engineering design, bid-ready plans and specifications associated with the advancement of the concept level design and the associated design documentation. There are some support services included in this amendment, specific to permitting, evaluation of existing lighting, signal timing, and bid phase support services. I think a copy of both the original contract and the drafted amendment are included in the packet. The duration of this amendment is for 14 months. Should this contract amendment be approved, we would seek to develop a refined concept design and present that at a second in-person open house meeting this summer. Input received at this meeting, including previous input, would be used to inform finalizing the concept design and associated reporting prior to advancing the formal engineering design. That engineering design could be underway as soon as this fall, at which point we would expect to know if construction grant funding has been secured. Design could be bid ready in the first half of 2026. The negotiated amount of this contract is approximately $374,000, including approximately 10% in management reserve. The new contract amount with HDR, including this amendment, would be approximately $566,000. The remaining local funded budget is anticipated to be necessary for staff contract administration, expenses, and a required agreement with WashDOT for their review and oversight of improvements along State Route 310. The two primary assumptions included in this contract amendment include no acquisition of the right of way. That was intended to be cost prohibitive and keeping the refinement levels to a strict refinement, not developing complete new concepts. So we understand that there's a desire from the public to go back to the drawing board and identify some new concepts for a design option, which would allow for a fully protected bike corridor and further safety enhancements for vulnerable users at these intersections. The design concepts presented to date have sought to balance competing needs under the right size approach and in alignment with previous planning under the project and studies within a competitive budget range, which maximizes grant funding opportunity. I want to be clear that the current concepts do not prioritize vehicles, but rather account for them as a road user. And they do this by improving their safety while managing the operation and associated impacts with removing two vehicle through lanes, minimizing impacts to adjacent local businesses due to the project, right? There's a lot of access out there. Considering operations of other road users such as Kitsap Transit and Waste Management, and ultimately ensuring that the operations are managed in a way which will not incentivize negative impacts in the surrounding neighborhoods. As previously discussed, the current project specifically seeks to improve safety for all road users. However, the public expectation for the safety of non-motorized users appears to fall short from what we've presented. While we're optimistic about the opportunity to make additional concept design refinements under this amendment, it's becoming more apparent that the vision for 6th Street may not align with the previous studies and may require a transition from a right-sized scope to a more extensive, costly, and timeless scope. At the Public Works Committee meeting Monday, Councilor Coughlin was kind enough to email us a summary of comments related to HDR's amendment, and there was discussion regarding pulling this item from the council agenda next week. In the event there is a consensus to push this amendment out as written, we are asking for specific clarity on project expectations, noting that achieving the public vision, as we understand it, will be challenging, under the project as currently scoped. So with that, I know I went through a lot of information really fast. It's been a long night, so I guess I'll open it up. Jeff, I'm happy to run through the information that you provided, or if you want to go through it, stop sharing here. Yeah.
Yep, so I'll open it up to the chair of Public Works. Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, that's Jane.
I'm the chair.
Okay. Well, then I'm going to open it up to Jane.
Well, this whole project, what you showed tonight is very different than what you've been showing the public before. And I'm curious, you show that you're going to put in buffered bike lanes. Where are you putting in buffered bike lanes? Because the plan presented to us, it was only a short segment near east of Callow. Are you proposing that we have more buffered bike lanes?
So,
now?
yeah, great question. So the concepts that we presented to the public are on the website. There's buffered bike lanes basically from the, connecting at the 11th Street intersection, running all the way to Montgomery, essentially. So the width of the existing roadway was actually wide enough there. So one of the things that we're doing is we are reducing the southbound through lanes south of the 11th Street intersection to a single through lane, right? Because at the 11th Street intersection, you've got the dual lefts. There's only a single lane. So we're going to carry that single lane. By carrying that single lane, we're able to increase the buffer. That's a higher speed area. There's some topography there. So that, in our mind, was our way to bring the level of traffic stress down for cyclists by providing that buffer and putting in vertical elements there.
For 2 blocks.
Well, from the 11th Street intersection to Montgomery. So you're going through Wyckoff, going through Callow, all the way to Montgomery. We also have some buffering at some of the intersections, depending on how the geometry works. And then what we haven't presented, what I'm hoping for, is that once we get into the downtown core area, we can kind of look at some options to reconfigure some of the turning movements that are potentially increase buffering basically from that downtown core area towards Washington. So it's a combination of, again, trying to maximize the space. And I mean, we hear the community, like their heart is in the right place. We just are very limited by space, right? And, the one thing that's been on the table is, hey, why can't the city get rid of that center 2-way left turn lane, right? So there's a lot of complications with that, right? And that's safety, and that's the stability of the traffic flow. So we've all been in 2-lane roadways. We all know what happens when a car is stopped turning left. I mentioned the number of access points, right? So that's one thing, is just the amount of delay that'll develop. So there's high level ways to evaluate that, and then there's very complex ways that we can evaluate that. So if we wanted to do a detailed evaluation, we talked to some of our traffic experts. They're going to have to go out in the field and get lots of data, right, to see where all the cars are turning. They're going to have to run some complex models. It could take up to 6 months to do a really thorough evaluation. And
okay, so you've included a lot of left turn lanes and right turn lanes, and there's left turn lanes where, by your traffic analysis, we have less than 6 cars an hour turning, and that's at the peak. So the kind of space that you're using there, it's definitely all about cars. It's not about the public. And the joint compatibility study that you call out, the whole idea of the joint compatibility study was to help the public that actually live in Bremerton to decrease a lot of the car traffic and not make it easier for vehicles, for commuters to get around fast and to do a left turn or to do a right turn. And so we're looking at that very differently. And then when I asked you about studies on going from 3 to 2 lane, you sent me a study that you said you were basing this project on. The information was taken in the late 90s. The report was put together in 2006. Road diets did not become popular for any city until after 2008. So, and then in the first paragraph, it says, this is more for rural areas. It's not to be considered as strongly in an urban area, which is what we're in. So it does look to me and to a lot of the public that we're placing more emphasis on driver, I don't know if it's driver safety or just to make it easier for drivers. at the worst hour of the day. But yet, this is a 24-hour city. You can see tumbleweeds going down Naval on the weekends. You don't have a lot of traffic on 6 at all during the weekends or after all the commuters leave town. So, I mean, we're building this road. All these decisions are being made for commuters, and that's why the public is really upset, because these are the people who live here.
Yeah. So, and those are all great points, and that's why we're asking for clarity, because as we've, delivered the scope of this project, we've tried to be as clear as possible on what the goals are, right? And when we say improving safety for all users, that means commuters, that means Bremerton residents, that means everyone that uses the corridor, right? So, it really is, in our mind, it's a really hard balance, right? So when we've got a project that is I'll call a retrofit project, right? We're not, we've invested a lot of money on 6th Street with street preservation. We don't want to go and, do that work and then, tear it out, right? So our job is to leverage the existing width of the street to the maximum extent feasible. And the vehicle traffic is something that we have to account for, right? They're a user, and we all know what happens when we don't account for traffic. And you talk about the peak hours. Well, it's infrastructure. We always think about any infrastructure. You always design to the peak hour. When you design a bridge, you don't design it for like an average load on the bridge. You design it for the maximum, because that's when things fail. And that goes the same for operations. Peak hours are when things are the least safe and when things fail. That is kind of the, from a very high level, how traffic operations works. So, I mean, certainly this council can, develop policy that maybe changes that approach. But our job as engineers is to make sure that we're, protecting health, safety, and welfare of the public. And we don't, necessarily say, well, we're going to treat, a commuter different from someone that lives here, right? We have data, and that data drives decisions in how the project outcome or how the project is developed.
So don't you think that commuters might choose not to use 6th Street as heavily, and that they might actually go on 11th or Burwell instead?
If, in what scenario?
Like in the morning, when this peak hour that we're looking at.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to have a higher diversion, right? So, you got to look at what does that diversion do to the other areas of the street network, right? And, we know that there are opportunities for, cut through traffic, like there are cut through routes in this area, the way that the grid system is. So, we want to kind of be careful about that. When we model a 3-lane section, which is what was done back in 2020, there was very little diversion assumed, because 3 lanes keeps flow stable enough to not divert traffic to other areas. So, and then that's just the traffic flow. Obviously, I spoke to, the emergency access, which, I'm sure, even when we met with, fire, they had concerns with even, some of the refuge areas that we're putting in. So I'm sure that they would have concerns over, a very limited area for emergency access. And then, from an operation standpoint, right? You think we, constantly have road work in the city. So, I mean, there's just multiple angles of this, that it's like, it's not just one thing. It's looking at the entire street, how it operates, and the users, and trying to balance that as best possible. So,
well, you've got a lot of cross hatching in the roadway to make it safer for cars, to keep them apart. Those areas could be used to buffer bike lanes instead, right?
You're talking about removing the 2-way left turn lane?
I'm talking, well, you've already removed it in some sections.
There's a very short segment, I think near Pennsylvania, that, again, that's an area that, again, we could look at, and already talked to HDR about looking at some of those areas that would be considered a refinement, right? Is, again, you have to, there's geometric design requirements. We can't just, end a lane and shift them over, without a taper. So, we'd be looking at that. But again, you're only gaining a very short section of buffered bike lane, and that's not even accounting if there's transit stops or driveways, right? There's going to be a lot of gaps, no matter how much vertical delineation that we put on the project.
Well, some of the other points that you and the designer had made, like we can't eliminate or we can't combine a through and left turn at Naval going eastbound because you can't shift a lane over. Well, if you go to Polsbo, WashDOT designed that exact same thing, and we called them up and talked to them, and they said it's got nothing to do with lane shifting. It's got everything to do with how you operate the signal. So I feel like we've been given information that when we go out and talk to experts at WashDOT or other cities, we're getting really different information.
Yeah, and if you're getting information, I mean, share it with us. I mean, we are your design experts. We hire, experts that do this type of work, all over the Puget Sound, right? HDR is a nationwide firm.
But they don't do this. They don't do this type of work.
Yeah, sorry. Our PM lives in Bremerton, is a Bremerton resident, right? So, our job is to make sure that, we're evaluating, not only design standards, but risk, right? There's a lot of engineering judgment that goes into traffic operations, safety analysis. That's our job as professional engineers, is to advise the council on, that sort of information. So if there's any information that you're seeing that contradicts, something that we've presented, please share that with us so we can, evaluate it and see why potentially you're getting a different answer.
Hey, can I suggest we go to the next council member? And so again, look, I learned my lesson on a previous thing. So if we want to spend all night and discuss it, that's fine. But what's before us is a contract modification number 2. And so if we can have fruitful discussions as far as you want to change something in the contract, in my opinion, this is the opportunity to do that. And maybe we can focus, but I'm opening it up. You guys want to, whatever. So Jeff, go ahead.
Absolutely. No, I think that's exactly, I'm gonna go and we're trying to get to. So I think a lot of kudos are in order. I mean, honestly, across the board, both from our staff and from the community, a long way on this, right? So we're the very, very early stage of this project. So I think it's important we get it right. And my goal is to make sure that all the viable alternatives are on the table and that we have a process for choosing, the layout of the street that everyone's happy with. And so we had the really good in-person meeting, and there was a lot of kudos from the community, especially on that first segment from 11th Street that came down, a lot of other elements. So I think there's a lot of positive momentum. But once they've had a chance to look at that and digest it, I really just see 2 outstanding issues that I don't think are that big that we can modify the contract language to account for. And the 2 I see, as we talked about, and this is in the email I sent, is this issue with how much center turn lane do we need? So it's very clearly a gray area. At some point, you probably have the history, Eric, between Park and Washington used to be 4 lanes on 6th Street. And at some point between 2012 and 2018, that entire stretch went from 4 lanes to 2. So there was a 4 to 2 conversion back in those years. Should be a traffic. And then, so, and then as mentioned, there's a segment from, check my notes here, from Hewitt to Roosevelt in the current proposal to convert it now from 4 to 2. And so I think that what the community's asking for is just to continue evaluating where the center turn lanes are really actually needed and where we could squeeze out more space. So I won't go into the exact wording, happy to run through it, but I think we can just modify the contract to make it clear that we would like that looked at again, and where center turn lanes are proposed to stay, it's just really justified. I mean, I look at where Noah's is right now. I think it's justified there, absolutely. But other areas may not be. So I think we have an opportunity to squeeze out some more width and get some more bike lane protection. That's one, I think, small change we can do to move forward.
Before we go on to
Sure.
another one, we have a discussion, Mr. Mattai's answer to that, whether we can reach consensus.
Yeah, so I appreciate that. So, we got your email. So the language that you had written was changing to providing a typical center vehicle to a left turn lane were critically justified. So, when you use the term critically justified, that leaves ambiguity in gray areas. So as I mentioned, we can expend a lot of money and time doing a really comprehensive evaluation on this. Safety is hard to put a metric on, right? We have crash reduction factors. We can develop a crash reduction factor and say, hey, if we put in a two-way left turn lane, we may have 10 fewer crashes a year based on similar projects. So, and then we also have to realize that the existing development that's there today, that may not be there in 10 to 15 years. So the majority of this corridor is, commercial, business, downtown core. So, you get a restaurant, you get a popular coffee shop, like access is going to change. So, I think what we're looking for is clarity, because I think my interpretation of the public comments, and I could be misspeaking, I know there's several people watching online right now, is they want full protection. So my fear is that if we, certainly we can do an evaluation and, we may have to come up with some criteria on how we're evaluating. But my fear is that we're going to take that back to the public, and it's going to be very intermittent, limited spots that we may consider. And then we're going to be back in this discussion saying, hey, we've got a lot of public, concern over, not providing a full protected bike lane, right? So, that's kind of what I'm just thinking out loud here. I'm just struggling with, don't need an answer now, but, certainly we can circle back with HDR and kind of maybe figure out what might make sense, right? Because I don't think expending, $50,000-$60,000 would be a good use of taxpayer funds for that effort. Certainly want to make sure that, we provide an evaluation that, at least is able to kind of convey, how the decision process is driven.
Yeah, and I think the really key part here is making sure we're doing it right now so that we don't have, misspend public funds later on. I think it's definitely the intent of everybody here. And so in that case, happy to work on the language. If it's not critically justified, I think the intent of the community is really clear. There's outstanding questions of where those center turn lanes are really needed and where not. So I'm happy to work on language there. But I think, I've been pretty vocal about this, that we just need that further justified. And I think we need that option on the table to look at. I'm not committing to one, but if there's going to be an option on the table, now's the time to do it, right? Anyway, now's the time. You want to go to this?
Do we want to have a discussion on
the second of two change, or go down this road?
So, yeah, we can do one of two options. We can have your second point, or we can have a discussion now whether we want to amend the contract to something to your effect, or if we're good with the language the way it is. You're asking.
Is there a
I've
specific?
got my hand up, excuse me.
I'm sorry, Denise, go ahead.
Yeah, I was not able to attend the Public Works Committee meeting because I had some appointments in Seattle. But I was able to watch it afterwards, which I would recommend that we all do from time to time because you see it in a different way. And with all due respect to what Eric is saying about it's a contract that's come before us, let's focus on the contract, any changes, yada, yada, yada. I can't let what I see going on and continuing to go on, keep going on without talking about it. One reason that it was decided to bring this to study session is because there were comments made by staff during the Public Works meeting that they were only talking to 2 council members. And they felt like they needed to get, input from the rest of the council, which is, of course, valid. But the way it was said, I don't think respected the role of the committee. When you're talking to 2 council members who are serving on a council committee, they're functioning as a committee. They're not simply 2 individual council members. And so I'm relying on this council to back this committee up. I remember during the Warren Avenue discussions, and I know, Eric, you never want to go back to that. That was horrible experience for all of us, or arduous anyway. I said something and I said, these conflicts are going to come up in every conversation we have, every discussion, every issue, every decision we have about active transportation projects. And lo and behold, it's happening. It happened on Naval, it's happening now on Sixth. And until we resolve this, we're going to see it keep happening. There's a definite disconnect between how we're looking at multimodal transportation or active transportation on council, or at least in Public Works, and the community, and the administration. The body language, even in this meeting, is notable. I have a couple of things to say that I think are really important. That first one, about the role of the committee. It's not simply to get reports. We have a responsibility of oversight. What was the intent of that funding? And Nick, I think you've done, as you always do, an incredible job of presenting information. There's nothing that I can disagree with in your presentation, and it's beautifully done. The comment about their hearts are in the right place was a little dismissive of community members, but besides that, I give you kudos on how you're trying to manage this, navigate this. The other thing that was said was, well, there's all this community, outpouring, but we're not hearing from the other side. Well, we hear from the community. Any community member has an opportunity to get in touch. And so to dismiss the community input that we're getting, much of it which, or many of whom are actual professionals who have expertise in this area, should not be dismissed. And I think, Nick, you've been very welcoming of all comments, but these are comments that I heard from Public Works staff during that meeting that really, really concern me. And so I'm glad that this has come to the study session. I think we have a real problem. I think we're navigating this project to project and from contract to contract, instead of having a vision for what multimodal transportation should be in Bremerton. And I'm really hoping that Parametrics or whoever is doing our active transportation plan is going to include a vision for what that should be. The question was asked in our Public Works Committee, maybe we shouldn't be putting all this into Sixth Street. If this isn't the appropriate east-west corridor for bikes and peds, why are we even doing this? So Nick has used a wonderful phrase called, it's a project of perceptions. I think all of our work is dependent on perceptions. And we really need a paradigm shift. This is a priority for the city. We're evolving. We're becoming less of a car-dependent community, more of a bike and multimodal community. And those who don't acknowledge that and respect that, we're running into this conflict every time. So I needed to say that. I know it's not pertinent to this decision on this particular contract, but I agree with Councilmember Coughlin when he said, okay, we're told at the 90%, it's like the wait. Okay, make a decision. But no, it's, we get told at 90%, we can't make any changes. So we're betting all of our money right now as a committee. We're saying, okay, then we got to do it now. Our voice needs to be heard now. We expect, a product, a plan to be the best possible. And I think that staff is really working hard on that. I think I'm just going to say, I think it's leadership, and we don't have vision. We don't have a vision for what, or else the intersection of Naval and Sixth wouldn't be such a problem. We look at project to project too much and not a comprehensive look at what we need in Bremerton. I'll stop talking now.
Thank you, Denise. So what's on the floor right now is to decide if we want to address Councilmember Coughlin's proposed changes. Or do we want to hear a second for those changes? And if you have the email, I assume you all do, you can see those for yourself. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Okay,
Discussion on that.
let's get to work then. What language do you want to change specifically in the contract?
Let me go
For this specific point,
goal and then the
First one.
specifics.
the one that we just got.
Yeah, which
Center
is
turn lanes,
yeah.
right?
So the goal is to ensure that this is, again, that the center turn lanes are really needed or justified, and to look at an alternative that minimizes the center turn lanes as much as possible to provide more buffered bike space. So
Section is that.
the
Cass,
changes
what?
to a compensate was right at the front of the contract. There's a number of, thank you, pick one there.
Scope of work?
Yeah.
Proposed improvements.
Okay.
Yep, there, thank you. Proposed improvements, there we go.
Okay.
So it already, again, kudos. The previous contract said providing a center two-way left turn lane outside of signalized intersections, west of Park Ave. So it's already been changed to providing a typical center vehicle two-way left turn lane and or dedicated left turn lanes at intersections.
Let's do Park Ave.
Yeah, so my suggestion there was just a small tweak. That's where I said we're critically justified, happy to work on that wording. I just wanted something about the justification in there, right? So it's leaving it open to study. I think the more important one is under section 5.01. That's where we're actually telling the contractor what we want to see come back to us. These are all the components we want them to study. So it's important that what we want to have on the table is in here. And this is where I was suggesting to add a sixth item and say further evaluation and alternative refinement, same language as the others, blah, 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 blah. Regarding further reduction of center vehicle turn lanes to allow for increased bike lane widths. So it just says, yeah, we want the contractor to take a look at that within their ability and budget and bring it back.
So one of the price points that was mentioned was 50 to 60K modifications. And it's looking at your entire scope of the changes requested. I'm curious if what a price point would look like for this specific change request, because it would require additional analysis. So
He said 50,000.
50, but that's for the overall questions, right?
No, I believe that was for this particular one. But
That was,
Mr. Ty-
that's if we wanted to do kind of more of a comprehensive evaluation, like actually, go and get detailed traffic counts, turning movements. That would give us, some really good information that, we could take it and find a way to package it, when we go out to the, the next in-person open house meeting to say, okay, hey, here's, here's the impacts, right? So are we now, we're gonna have to look at, do we restrict left turns at more locations? So now is, you have more right in, right out driveways. Is that gonna impact business access?
And I've been hearing, I don't know, I'm not a public works person, I'm gonna say it over and over and over, but what is this that I'm hearing about left turn lanes going away? What am I hearing? I think I've heard this from you, Jane, that left turn lanes are gonna, or left.
No, right turn only.
Right turn only
The
lanes.
right turn,
Okay, turn
right
only
on
lanes.
red is going away within the next
And
decade.
is that a piece of this, is that a component of this?
Yeah.
I wouldn't say this,
Not
mean,
this one,
it's-
okay, setting that aside.
not the center turn lane issue.
Okay, so then the 50 to 60K is a comprehensive and not just a price point for this specific item. Does the comprehensive that Nick's discussing cover all of your questions?
No, so again, I look at it and there are sections of the road which have been decided not to have a center turn lane. So clearly that
Okay.
a certain level of analysis, I would say, has already been done to look at that and make those decisions. So if you could reapply that analysis and.
Is there data that's been shared with committee members that has not been shared with Public Works regarding, I hear you talking to WashDOT and they say this and that. It sounds like Public Works wants that information, but is there information pertaining to this center turn debate that has not been shared from WashDOT?
So
not from WashDOT.
Okay. All right. Is there information not just, we have a really great analysis from some public members, but is there any?
For this specific one, I think what's in our inboxes is just examples of other roadways. Again, I go back to 6 itself, went from 4 to 2. There's no center turn lane right now between from Park all the way to Washington. There's businesses. We're at one of the buildings right now. So that's just the outstanding question. Again, to be clear, just make sure it's on the table, not saying I support it or don't support
I'm
it.
amenable to those two changes that you recommended.
Okay, and so the expectation then, get you in a sec, is that this contract basically examines the left turn lanes in more in depth and comes back with a quantitative reason to justify their existence, or saying, you know what, we could remove some. That's what you're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah. So when
this
community says, you know, why the heck do you have a center turn lane here? We could get more bike protection.
Right.
We either have looked and said, you know what, it's not really critical there. You're right. We can get some more protection. Or we say, you know, this is really, really needed for X, Y, and Z. And I don't want to dismiss really good justifications already given. Now, like we don't have some answers, but
okay,
the community is asking for that to be evaluated more.
All right, Jane, you have something to build on that? Because then that's the ask.
Yes, I do.
Go ahead.
I think that the scariest part of the contract is once we okay this, Public Works can come back with anything and it'll be like a 90% plan. And we have no real input after that. So personally, I would like to see that we split this contract up so that it goes to the 30% plan. And then once the council and community accepts whatever it is, then give them the rest of the contract.
Okay, so you're proposing something in.
That's my third suggestion as well.
Okay.
For our number one, that's my number three.
I have a quick clarifying question when it's appropriate regarding center turn lanes and additional space for bike lanes. Isn't that a good time?
Depends if that was your second point, is a center lane. Let's see.
That was one.
That was
One
number
was
one.
center
So
lane.
go ahead.
Three.
So you look like you want to respond to something, but
Well, I think we're
I'm not-
open to your first suggestion. It's the language that we're concerned about because it's subjective. Like,
sure.
What is going to be enough to critically evaluate it? Like, we're going to do what we think is a critical evaluation, maybe not modeling for $60,000 unless we really think we need to. And then we're going to present it. And then if you disagree with it, like, how do we get off of that space, right?
Right.
So I'm concerned that with that language, we can put it in there. Like, I'm not saying we can't put it in there and we can move this forward. I just see it kicking the can down the road to have conflict later unless there's some clear way that we're going to determine that there was enough evaluation, right?
No, I think all very good point. What I see down the road is we need the harder pros and cons, right? If we have community saying, I don't want a certain turn lane in this location, I don't understand it, and this is why I get back the dollar value. And we can say, yeah, if that's not there, we're all really convinced that this is going to be an enormous backup right here. But right now, what was given to the public at the last meeting didn't really justify that, right? So if there was a segment by segment of a bit more of analysis that the vast majority of reasonable people could look at and say, I understand why that's so needed right there, that'd be helpful. So I'm happy to adjust the language, but I think the intention's clear, and if we can get there on the language, yeah.
I don't think it changes what I just described. I mean, I think we're engineers. We look at standards. You know, we started with a scope that we thought was a 3-lane configuration. There was a lot of energy, a lot of interest in moving it forward quickly. Council did something I've never seen them do before, which is totally fund the transportation design right up front because we wanted to show progress, right? We shifted our workload so that we could accommodate that, so we could deliver this project. And it feels like there's been an evolution of the scope as we go. And I understand the interest, but we have to have some clear method of making the decision.
Yeah.
Unless you want to take it away, right? And if you take it away, it's probably got to be a council resolution or something like that. I think we're open to evaluating where we can enhance. You know, if there's a place that there's not a turning movement that's going to cause a significant conflict, I think we're open to not having a two-way left turn lane in that location. Like, we're happy to evaluate that. And there may be some of that, because we looked at it like, hey, we have one cross section and this is a cross section that makes sense with 4 lanes going to 3, right? So, like, I'm open to that. But I also know there's lots of other language that we use, like all ages and abilities. There's so many entrances on that roadway that all ages and abilities, we're never going to meet it. And I agree with, Denise, quite honestly, we need to figure out what the rules are so we stop having this kind of.
I think we're going. So and maybe this comes down to how the decision's made, because I agree. I don't think this can be a go and come back at 90%, right? We need I've said this multiple times, it's my number 3 thing, is we need a checkpoint. And so when that decision is made, in whatever manner we agree on, we just need to know that these were the pros and the cons, and the community got to weigh in on it. And we got to make an informed decision about whether those lanes were there or not in certain places.
So my question, and I'm going to ask the engineers about this, was the center lanes. I guess I'm curious if it's more hazardous or more safe, in your opinion, to have an inconsistent bike lane system. And what I mean by that is protected and then buffered. And then because if there's a section where you can take out the center lane and create more protected bike lane space, and then there's a section that's unprotected, is that safe, in your opinion?
So it's a very interesting question, right? Because, I'm going to use Councilor Fry's favorite term. It's a project of perception. So it's that answer to that question is going to depend on who you're talking to, right? Mm-hmm. So, we talked a lot about, like, we said, hey, we can put up maybe some vertical delineators like we have in Washington Avenue. Mm-hmm. So if you're asking me, Mr. Atai, I'm gonna say that's great, but in my mind, that's not a protected bike lane. And what that might do is that might give a false sense of security for someone that wants to, lower stress level on 6, that wants to ride. They see all these vertical delineators and they're like, hey, I don't have to watch for cars as much because we got these delineators, but then you're crossing a driveway 10 seconds at a time, driveway. There
are so many entrances, as you just mentioned earlier, on 6th Street.
And there's studies, and there's studies. I found a really good study out of Miami that evaluated bike vehicle crashes. And on roads with bike lanes, they found that about 75% of bike and vehicle crashes happened at intersections and driveways.
Yeah.
Right? So going to Ned's point, when we say all ages and abilities, I'm thinking of what we're trying to build on View Ridge, right? And Safe Routes to School, separated side path, low traffic volumes, really low stress facility. Not a lot of it's residential, not a lot of, cars turning in and out. So I think that's a decision the community needs to make as part of the active transportation plan update.
Huge change for something that I think about is I witnessed an accident quite a few years ago now, but on Wheaton Way, and not an accident, but a car hitting somebody on a skateboard, and they were pulling out from the car dealership. It was a person actually sold me a car, and I stopped just checking to see if they were okay, but it was from basically a driveway, right, like an exit point from, and it was a very wide sidewalk. And so I just think about that, and I just worry about the actual, like, how protected are folks, even if we take those center turn lanes out. There's just been a lingering question in my mind, and I appreciate your answer to that. It is subjective, but do you?
Yeah.
Can I respond?
So, and so if I recall correctly, Jeff still had the floor as far as 1, 2, and 3. So.
Oh, I thought we were discussing the number 1.
Well, it sounded like they were open to it and whatever. And it is 8 o'clock, and you know what? I don't care if my car turns into a pumpkin. If you want to do this, we can.
There's a golf ball sized hail out there, Eric. We're protected.
But I thought it was everybody's time and time management. If we can go back to point 2, and then we'll revisit this as far as, let's get it all on the table, because Jane had the 3rd one, which is the kind of a.
Okay, so we're going to point 2. Got it.
Can I just really quick respond?
Would love a response.
I know. No. I think excellent points, but I think what we're hearing from the community and from a lot of the riders themselves is that any extra width, any extra delineators, any extra sort of I mean, more the word protection, right? That helps. And I'll say that too. I mean, so we look at Kitsap Way right now, when you ride it all the way up towards Autoplex, it varies. It varies in the amount of buffer and the width. There are a lot of driveways, but every time when I ride it and I get to that section where there's more buffer and there's more space, I mean, no, it feels a lot safer. I know there's more room to maneuver, there's more room to see things coming. So that's my personal experience. And I think what we're hearing from our users. So point two,
Thank you.
yep, no, good. Point two was naval and six. So and brought this up at several past meetings, is that we have here the confluence of two major non-motorized projects, right? Naval, which we've already talked at length about, and then sixth here at the very beginning. And so there's a real opportunity. I think one idea that's been brought forth by the community, again, many great ideas that the community brought forth are incorporated in this contract or are going to be added. So that's fantastic. But I'd say the one major one that hasn't is doing a protected intersection at Sixth and Naval, and it's really not fancy. There's some diagrams in the email, but essentially you are making sure that the bike lanes stay along the outside of the road. You're making sure they can be ahead of the traffic. And you're putting in, and they could start as temporary barriers. Some cities start them as cones and then eventually do something permanent. But you're putting in essentially protections, refuge islands that protects not only the bicyclists, but the pedestrians. And it causes cars to slow down. They can't make a really sharp curve. They have to make a much wider curve. And so the design that's in your inbox was done and had input from a bunch of community members that we've talked to. And it's based on NACTO's protected design standards. It's based on a webinar too done by this county in Maryland in tool design, which is well known for multimodal design. So it is, what seems to be the best standard for merging two intersections like this we have. So I very much think that should be on the table because we don't have a solution on Naval yet. We are luckily still studying Sixth and we have funds to do it. So this is the chance to do that intersection right, have really gold standard protective intersection. So the actual change to the contract is adding a number 7 to that scope of work under 5.01. And the alternatives that come back to us, and that is one of the alternatives is doing a, I'm sorry, I lost track, to be real specific, modify item 2, thank you. So we're modifying item 2 under 5.01 to include language that a protected intersection would be part of the design or one of the alternatives on the table.
And does that require any purchase of right of way?
No. Yeah, so you can do it without purchasing right away. You do have to either decide that there's no dedicated right turn lane or that you merge the left and straight lane, as was mentioned with the lane offset. Yeah.
Mr. Atai?
Yeah, so, no, certainly, if there's any intersection, that protected intersection would be suitable for, it's definitely Sixth and Naval, right? Makes a lot of sense. So we have had HDR look into protected intersection for NACTO guidance. We would need to acquire right of way to meet the design requirements because there's, the way a protected intersection works is the bikes, as they're approaching the signal, they actually queue all the way almost against that little curb return protection, right? So they have to be in a queue area and not in conflict with either the crosswalk or the other bikes coming in the other direction. Plus, then you start looking at the turning movements, what that requires, even if we don't do an eastbound right turn lane, which we're recommending due to the gate operations, you're still having to widen the right of way. Now you're impacting 4 corners, right? So, what I mentioned was potentially we can look at some protected elements within the existing right of way, right? But, that again is not going to be a NACTO protected intersection, but certainly, I have no issue with including that evaluation, and we could come to the table and say, hey, here's what the design would look like. Here's how much right of way we would need. And oh, by the way, this is the impact to the project budget and to the schedule.
Is that including a left turn lane? You're saying we have to buy right away if we have a dedicated left turn lane at that intersection.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would like you to look at not having a dedicated, there's so few cars at peak hour there.
Can they fix the naval?
Yeah, so again, so again, you know,
It depends on the movement, which
you gotta look at the whole intersection. So if you make one side a shared through and a left, but the other side has enough left turns that you need a left turn lane. Well, now you have, I think it's shown in Jeff's
Then you have
exhibit
this-
he sent over, they're kind of head on to each other, right? So now maybe you can wiggle that a little bit and have a little offset, but typically the guidance is you don't want more than half of a lane width offset, or you end up with a safety issue.
I sent you a picture in Polsbo that WashDOT designed that over a decade ago, and that intersection seems to be working fine, and it's a full lane shift. According to WashDOT, the engineer who designed it, it's all about the signal. It's not about the lane shift.
Yeah, happy to take a look at that. I mean, again, not familiar with the
You did
intersection.
send it tonight, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
So it sounds like we're in agreement that we could look at that.
We could just want to make sure everyone's aware that it might, you know, more than likely is going to trigger a right-of-way phase. More than likely, I think, Councilor Coughlin, you know, I sent you the cost for the right-of-way option that we presented back in November. I mean, that was $1 million. This, now we're touching 2 additional corners, you know, and now we get into, well, what is the timing of the Naval Avenue project now, and how does that work if we're already acquiring right-of-way? We might not have this decision for another year. You know, that project's been under right-of-way acquisition for years. There's some logistics that we have to figure out.
Yeah, so sounds like the what's kind of in contention is what can be done without acquiring right away, because kind of the design in hand seems to work well without requiring right away. It seems feasible within all the existing right away that we have. So maybe that's worth a deep dive with the community members and looking at it. And there's maybe some, right? I mean,
No, the design right now shows 3 lanes heading eastbound.
so
There's a dedicated left, a dedicated right, and a through lane.
the right is one of the called city provided options. The community option combines lanes in order to make it feasible. What appears to be a very feasible modern protected intersection without any extra right of way.
So I think what we're saying is we're willing to evaluate it.
Yeah.
I think you can put it in, we can evaluate it. There's gonna be a cost, you know, in the scope and, you know, to evaluate it. We're pretty confident, and we've already talked to HDR, we're pretty confident that when we do evaluate it and it meets a standard, right? And that means turning movements, lane shift, all of the things that, all of the alignment and geometry for that intersection, we're pretty confident after talking to our consultants that it's going to result in a right-of-way need. One of the things that happens when you look at turning movements that are turning right for big vehicles, you know how those wheels go up on the curb sometimes, like they need a bigger radius at the corner to make that turn. So one of the things they evaluated was turning movements for the design vehicle to see what would happen if we did that. So if we don't want large vehicles driving up over this protected bike lane and up over the corner of like the ADA ramp, then you need to move the sidewalk back far enough that the turning movement is clear, right? When you do that at 4 corners, you end up with a bigger intersection and with a right-of-way need. Maybe we need to make the decision, like this is a significant scope change for the original vision of the project. And that assumption that Nick talked about earlier, where we weren't going to get right-of-way, I think that intersection, to be really protected the right way, is going to require right-of-way, which could be okay. I think that's a policy decision that council needs to make. It impacts schedule, it impacts budget. There's probably a right-of-way phase. But I think this project has evolved from just put paint on the ground to we want fully protected bike lanes and protected intersections. And there's been a growth of, you know, in interest. So I think that's okay, but there's going to be an impact. And so when we come back and evaluate it, and then we say, here's the impact of that. I mean, council's going to have to decide if they want to wait for the improvements, go get more funding, wait for right-of-way acquisition. All of that is okay, but it's a change from the path we've been on since we started this project. So.
I think Denise's comments earlier, this is definitely any construction project is going to be as agile as possible. This is a very agile project. As we continue to learn modern best standards, and the community gets engaged and involved more than they have before, which is fantastic to see. So it sounds to me like there's community thinks they have a design that works with that additional right of way. Sounds like that's in contention. So that needs to be kind of resolved.
Community meeting
With the community, yeah, with the community, so that everyone can understand decisions. Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
But I mean, I didn't do it. Our consultant did.
Right.
It was a transportation design,
Right.
professional. So, I mean, that's what we're hearing and that's what we think the answer is going to be. But doesn't mean we can't evaluate it. And maybe this project needs, maybe that's what it needs. And then, but there's decisions, like things cost money, things take time. There needs to be a shift in, if it's that important to protect that whole intersection, then we all need to realize that there's going to be an impact to the project that we're trying to deliver right now, right?
And it could be a modular component that's, we get to the end, we have all these pieces we're trying to put together and we're trying to deal within budget, and we say, we can't build that right now, but what we're going to build allows for that in the future as more money comes in. So that's why, like, putting it on the table now, I think is critical.
An example is the turn circle on Washington. We didn't know the traffic circle. That was years later, but the design was there and then eventually got mine.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jim.
I am uncomfortable rejecting the engineer's feedback on this specific issue regarding right of way. And what I'm hearing makes sense to me about large vehicles jumping the curbs. When I look at this intersection, I mean, this is a more commercial area. And we have a service station, we have more commercial areas, and hopefully one day this other service station will be something, right? But I want to know if what I like is the idea of a community meeting to discuss this. I don't know that I could necessarily get behind a community member analysis versus our professional engineers and consultants analysis. I do respect the being skeptical of an analysis. However, I want to make that clear. Can we discuss how we want to handle this?
I think the community members that worked on this took truck traffic into account. But again, if there's a number off, if there's a design standard misinterpreted, either way, that just, things that just need to be resolved. It could be, I think, we get people around the same table looking at the same sketch. I think that helps.
What will we do when we have this meeting if and neither side opinion has changed?
It comes back to the seven of us
Yeah.
at some point, right?
Yeah.
To see what we need to be convinced of.
And
Kind of, like, there is a professional engineer that has to stamp this set of plans.
Yeah.
So while maybe eliminating a right turn, left turn pocket, things like that. But if there's a geometry that we don't think is safe, we're probably going to
You're
have
not
a
gonna
hard
sign
time
off on it.
getting like our consultant to stamp that.
And if you say, look, this has to be 33 1/3 degree, and that's not, and that's exactly, you can point exactly where in the code that is, that's pretty black and white. Yeah. Would never try and override that.
Michael, would you like to comment on this process?
Oh, am I still here?
Oh, how many more peanut butter pretzels are left? Oh, thank you, Christine.
And Michael's got the floor, please.
I was actually trying to remember when, 'cause I'm not even sure if I was on council yet, where I met with a bunch of citizens about doing this. It was Jamie Forsythe, who's since moved away. I think Kevin Walthall was there, and some other neighbors. And part of it, and this is where this started, was to do something that would also help. Literally, the phrase that came out of that meeting was like sort of stitching the neighborhood back together, right? We cut this big swath of pavement through the neighborhood. So, folks who want to cross over to go to what's the name of the park up there? Kiwanis. It would make it easier. We put in that hawk signal too to help compensate that. And you know, 'cause that's right, there's that, you probably have seen it, there's the Iowa DOT has a pretty good video about the 4 to 3. You know, and you were saying something about it's not a lot of evidence to go down to the 2. And that's probably because nobody's done it enough to then study it, right? So people don't even think to me, that they don't think it's good enough of an idea. But that's a little different than what we're talking about here, but I had that thought earlier. You know, so these projects all take a long time. And, you know, I definitely want to see progress. So I mean, I'm definitely for making some changes to, you know, to this language. I feel like, you know, I don't want to sort of, you know, throw a bunch of money at something to come out with the same result. Like I want to,
Right.
I guess I want the feeling that we could net the result we're hoping for, and not just saying, let's spend the money to prove it can't happen. So, you know, right now, you know, I'm sort of following the engineer side, saying that they've looked at the proposed, if you don't mind, I'm just going to refer to it as the citizen proposal. And they see the need for like things like right of way or things like that.
Right.
The other thought I had, and now I feel like this, I mean, it could be thrown in or thrown out. But one of the questions I was going to bring up, and again, I've not studied biking, you know, I know how to ride a bike. But I was wondering if, for instance, there was a way, you know, Denise is talking all about compromise, or the word and, like, you know, could we come up with something where there were protected, you know, like, I'm sorry, I feel like been waiting to talk all this time. And how, you know how like a climbing lane on like certain highways or things like that, like the thought of a protected sort of climbing lane for bikes. I don't know if it's I would feel more vulnerable cranking myself up the hill than I would if I'm just rolling down past, you know, Star of the Sea kind of thing. So I was wondering, you know, literally to protect one side, you know, it would kind of flip flop wherever the uphill is, you know.
Way on one side?
No.
Okay. That's
Well,
not what you're talking about?
I don't like that, but if people told me that's the best way, I would go for that. But I'm not a huge fan of that. But
yeah, not on this type of street.
I wasn't a huge fan of it for the bridge either. But anyway, let me see if there's anything else I was going to say. I could probably wrap this up. No, so I think that's good. Like I said, we started out. I do feel like we do a little like bait and switch with you guys, because we literally said like, oh, it's just paint. Can you just do it when you're 100% right when you say that? Because I remember those conversations before you guys were on the council, like we'll come up, you know, it's just like, oh, it's so easy, just do it. And then we've gotten further and further and further, and it was supposed to be this project that didn't cost a lot of money, that didn't require the resources or things like that. So I think I can stop there. I want this to happen. I really don't want to delay it. The thought of having it next year sounds amazing. And I don't want to spend unnecessary money, but I'm willing to spend money, and I'm willing to put the extra time in.
So here's my give you guys my thoughts.
Nope. Great.
I'm siding with, you know, I read through this project and oh, this is a great thing. It's going from 4 to, it satisfies, again, I remember the conversations, and not too recently, as late as last year, slap some paint on it, we're all good or whatever. But you know, that's fine. And now it's evolved to this, and I don't want to be critical of my fellow council members on this process or the community. I understand.
Absolutely not.
This is happening. Okay, so that's not a win-win. What I'm trying to do is, I'm a budget guy, so this money is coming out of our transportation capital fund. If we spend additional funds, I assume that's going to come out of that, and that's going to take away from another project. That's a valid for design.
We don't have any design money other than the city.
So
experience cap.
we'd have to extract more money out of the budget. And then we've got, we don't even have money to build this. We're hoping, we believe, if we have a plan that's already shovel ready, that we're going to get the $3 million award to go ahead and do this.
And that was based
Maybe.
on our understanding of the scope when we did the grant application 6 or 8 months ago,
And
which
they-
is the kind of standard 4 to 3 configuration with bike lanes, not necessarily, like it probably doesn't cover a protected intersection.
And so the grant application is basically based on what you're submitting for us tonight.
Well, we thought the scope of the project
The
was.
scope, and this is what you've already applied for the grant. So if we do these changes as far as competitiveness for this money, well, first of all, if it costs more than 3 million, it's gonna come out of the city, or they're gonna increase the amount of the award.
Or we need to, yeah, we either need to look for more money, do another grant application, come out of, capital fund balance, somehow we're gonna have to make up the difference on that.
Right.
And that doesn't speak to any right of way acquisition. So, yeah.
Understood.
Yeah.
So from a risk analysis perspective, I was looking at this as dollars and cents, and I know there's emotions involved in this, but if I looked at it dollars and cents, I'd say this is a much better improvement than what we have now. And this is our way to get a shovel-ready project. I'd say, yeah, I'm good with this. That's mine. But I'm afraid I'd probably represent the minority, thinking about the number of people in this council. So the next thing is, how do we reach to happy medium? And I'm hearing we want more public input before it's all decided, before it's a done deal. And the fear is that it would become a done deal if we approve this next week. So I'm asking you guys to turn to page 21 in your packet and under the major milestone schedule. Help me out with the nomenclature. I know it's explained further on in the contract, but the notice to proceed, I assume, is basically the council awards a contract, go ahead, HDR in phase 2. The refined alternatives development role plot, May, June of 25. The reason why I'm asking, what is that, is because the second in-person public outreach is in July. What is under the refined alternatives development role plot? That's going to take 2 months. What is that?
That's the actual process of refining the concept design prior to presenting it to the public. So we'll be working with HDR. We'll probably have some internal coordination, and then, work through some of these refined concepts based on some of the feedback we received, based on some of the updated design standards. We'd want an opportunity to review that before it goes to the public in July.
Okay.
So that's physically the process of developing the refinements to the alternatives.
And you use HDR to work through that. Okay, so would a reasonable compromise be, we approve this notice to proceed because we have to get to the next stage. And we just fund it through the refined alternatives development role plot and the second in-person public outreach meeting. Cut the contract to there. I think that's what Jane was talking about. And that's mine. And then come back to the council. And as much as I'm not looking forward to it, and I'm sure you're not, but I'm trying to get us to where we can go.
We would like to have something approved next week.
No, right. Approve this just like I'm going the road, and break this off, and then have the public input. And after you come with your refined alternatives, and then address the council again. And in the meantime, work through Public Works and address the council again in a similar meeting like this and saying, okay, here's what we reached from the public. Here's our answers to the public. So we can all be informed, and then we got to make a decision. Is that reasonable, or are we just spinning wheels again?
I think that keeps us moving forward. I think the downside of it is, like what just said earlier, when we come back and we bring something that we think meets good engineering design practice, compromises the use for all of the user, compromises how everyone is accommodated, and then it's not enough because I need fully protected bike lanes throughout that whole corridor, and I can't have a two-way left turn lane, and I can't have right and left turn pockets, and it has to be protected at navel. when you get to those absolutes, and we just presented what we think is the best alternative that moves something forward.
Yeah.
Then the council has to decide if you want to spend any more money designing it.
And that's exactly where we ended up on naval. And I'm afraid this is the same route I'm sorry, Denise, it's the same route we're gonna have to do for this one, is do what I just described and come to the meeting. And then the council members are gonna have to make that tough decision perhaps of, do we fund the project? And because we have something in hand, just like naval, or do we delay it and we want to get all these, I won't say, I don't know what the words, all these other improvements and risk the project from ever getting funded. That's kind of what we went through with naval. And so I think this council is going to have to go through that process again. And I'm sorry, I don't want to go through it.
I think it's okay. Like, it's not ideal. This isn't how we typically deliver projects, right? These processes that we're in now we have a long history of successfully delivering projects. This isn't our normal path. But I mean, if this is how we are able to move forward, I just don't know how, like, we keep coming to this impasse where we present something that we're telling council meets the standards, meets good engineering practice, is recommended by our design professionals, very respected, capable professionals. And then we're told that's not good enough. You need to go do this. Like, it's hard to figure out how we resolve it. Right, that's kind of what we keep.
No worries, Ned. I understand that.
Yeah.
But I can count the votes in the room, and I'm just suggesting that we have to do it this way.
I think we're okay with that.
Okay with that? Well, I'm going to ask every council member if you guys are okay, if we're okay with that approach.
So at what task do we cut the contract?
After the second in-person public outreach, a short term after that. So basically, it's going to come before the council after the second person public outreach.
Okay.
Mr. Atai.
Yeah, so just a quick question. So I'm assuming that's based on the current contract with the changes that were discussed, correct?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, you're going to consider it, but I'm not necessarily saying you got to spend the $50,000 or whatever.
Right, evaluate the left turn pockets and maybe
you're going to get a public
evaluation,
input.
but evaluate left turn pockets, right?
Yeah.
Look for opportunities to minimize that. I think I think we should probably do that anyway. So
Perfect.
And then there's the evaluation of the protected intersection. When we evaluate a protected intersection, it's going to meet the standards. It's not going to be a compromise. So we're going to go evaluate it, and we're going to look at turning movements, lane shift, all of the things that our engineers say that we need to evaluate for an intersection. And then we'll bring that back. I'm pretty sure that's going to come back with an answer that we're not going to like. But we can definitely evaluate it, and then we'll have a clear picture and a discussion as to why we think if we want a protected intersection, this is what we need, right?
In an ideal world, there'd be some discussion in between with community, of that community submit a proposal if it's not working in certain areas. Is there a way to tweak it and get to as protected as possible intersection?
Well, so that's now you're compromising the standard, right? And so as protected as possible, then it's not protected. And so I kind of don't want to bring this up, but I think I need to say it. I think I've heard Jane and you say, hey, we need some two-way left turn lanes up that court, at least around Noah's, I've heard. As soon as we agree that there needs to be a two-way left turn lane, we will not have a fully protected bike lane through that section.
Right.
So we talk about the corridor needing to be fully protected, but we know there's going to be compromise along that corridor where it's not, in order to balance that, the uses, right? So I think we need to be careful about using the term protected if it's not meeting the protected standards, because once we call it protected and then it's not, and somebody gets hurt, now we have a serious liability problem.
Yeah.
So I think we need to use the word enhanced a lot more, right? Which I think is a good word, right? And we would like to provide as enhanced a protection as I shouldn't even use it that way.
We're trying to get as best as possible. Is that big enough?
Yeah. So
that's the goal right here.
I don't want to call it protected.
How can we squeeze out the best possible thing? And we're all feeling good at the end of the day that we did the best we could within our budget.
And I think to go back to your question, like, is it safer? I think it's where you can maximize the enhancements, it's probably safer. Where you can't, it's less safe than where you maximize the enhancements, right? But this project, without doing reconstruction or really compromising on traffic operations, which I think compromises safety, I think it's going to be challenging to have what's being requested by the public, which is fully protected bike lanes, buffered protected bike lanes, and a fully protected intersection. That's going to be difficult to achieve without a lot more influx of time and money.
And I think that, you know, if we were to find more opportunities for, you know, buffered bike lanes, you know, I can see, you know, maybe the public saying, well, hey, well, now we want, you know, we want physical concrete barriers. We don't want flexible posts. So, I mean, at some point it's, you know, it's what is the benefit cost ratio based on what funding we have available to deliver a project that, you know, meets
we can talk to our constituents about that. So, you know, one thing that everybody's looking at is.
1 second, Jane. Jennifer had her hand up.
Sorry.
I do need some more education on buffered, protected. I need another demonstration on that. I'm not on Public Works, and so I really appreciate the point that you're bringing up, because that's been my concern. Just as somebody who uses the roads for running and walking, okay? I'm not a bicyclist, but I don't know what that looks like, buffered, protected, etc. I would love to see an infographic of what it would look like under these two scenarios, what the driveways look like for the residents, you know. So that's something that's missing from my scope. And I have the pictures, but that doesn't do enough.
I think one thing that's missing from this discussion is not every single person who gets in the bike lane at 11 is going to go all the way downtown, right? So if it's safer, you might let your kid ride their bike up to High Avenue and then go over to the park.
Maple Avenue, Kiwanis.
Yeah.
Okay.
So any section that can be more protected, the better. Because I think everybody's looking at it like, well, you start here and you go there, and so it all has to be the same. And there's no way we can make it all the same. There's different uses.
Right.
So
exactly.
And I'll be happy to show you
I
the
would
difference
love.
between.
We don't get that kind, like when we get the feedback and all the citizen comments come into council, it's not like, hey, do the best you can and enhance it as much as you can. It's like, we need a fully protected corridor, right? It's kind of definitive. So I don't disagree with what you're saying. Everybody isn't going to ride from 11th to Warren, right? And I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what we can't really predict right now what that's going to look like, because it's not really comfortable to ride a bike on it at all right now, right?
I think part of the reason you're getting those sorts of comments from the public was at the beginning of this project, there were statements made by staff that, well, we can't do any kind of protection because of snow or Amazon deliveries or trash trucks. And there was like a whole laundry list, and that just set up the public. And frankly, I think it colored my view a lot when that whole list was given, where we really know that in the rest of the world where they have bike lanes, all those things are overcome. So when we start off saying, oh, absolutely not, and then it stirs up the community.
So let's focus on moving forward though. So Michael, you have a point?
Well, but maybe say you may be able to do this, or whoever did that great map that you sent. But I just like look down 6th Street, looking for like the sweet spots where we might be able to pull away the center turn lane.
Right.
There are so many businesses and driveways, just assuming nothing ever changes in the future. I was wondering either if you guys have like looked at it. I mean, if we could get a printout, I would mark it with a Sharpie, but like, I just I'm not seeing like places where we could get valuable reclaiming the center island. If that's something you can look at, or if we could.
Yeah,
Please.
both sat down with the community members segment by segment looking at it.
And
I think there are. I'd have to go again.
But without restricting driveways, because I feel like if we're going to restrict someone's driveway, we have to notify all of them of what we're thinking of doing.
I mean,
And there are somewhere, maybe it's right in, right out in a few places, minor access, but a lot of those houses don't, the driveway's right in front. I mean, like yours,
There's a lot
I think,
that
right?
do.
I don't have one.
So
Yeah.
I have an observation. You guys correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not trying to be condescending, mean, or anything like this, but I'm putting on I used to be an accountant. I'm retired. But in a way, you guys are accountants, you're CPAs. I'm inclined, you attest to the financial statements, you're the experts, I'm good. That's where I'm at as far as you guys being engineers. I'm good. I trust you. Put your stamp on it, get consulted. And again, I'm not trying to mean, but it sounds like some people want to see your work papers to justify how you came to your conclusion. And I'm getting that feeling that some of the people just want to understand your thought process. Some people could consider it as being, boy, you're really digging into the weeds. But then I totally kind of understand, well, like, what? Are you kidding me? I'm an engineer. What are you doing? But I'm getting that if they can understand, you just mentioned, if you can maybe understand some of the rationale of why you came to that conclusion, we could reach consensus a lot easier on the final design. Does that make sense, what I just said?
Yeah, and so I think, so first of all, I don't want anyone to feel like this is a Bremerton issue. Search road diet, rechannelization, and look at all the other communities that have struggled with this type of project. So first of all, I think this is a good discussion. To Councilor Fry's point, it's even harder when we're trying to make decisions on a project by project basis without this huge vision. But I guess I lost my train of thought. What were we talking about?
It's not just a Bremerton problem.
Oh, yeah.
It's warm and it's like, I have a need as well, which is from both sides, citizens, from engineers, and Anna talks about this a lot, but I need some damn plain language because both sides are giving me all this stuff that I don't understand it. And if you're going to talk to a regular ass person in this community, they're not going to understand what the hell Travis is saying or what you're saying either. So that's why I'm saying, give us some damn pictures. Go through the list, mark what needs to be changed according to the constituents that you're talking to, and also with the engineer's critique of that, just some plain language pictures for the average dummy like me, please. Okay.
I remembered where I was going with that. I'm sorry. So
Finally,
you helped that you jogged my memory. So, it's always a challenge to convey technical information to the public. So I've seen firsthand what happens when someone requests traffic counts, right? And we provided traffic counts, and they're saying, "Oh, look, you only have 7 left turns here." Well, there's a much bigger picture, right? And then that stirs up the community, and they're like, "Yes, 7 left turns. What are they thinking, right?" So I think we can absolutely do a better job of communicating now that we have some really good input, communicating some more of the decision-making process. I think to Ned's point, the risk is always, well, they don't care about our study. X, Y, and Z cities have done this and they haven't had any issues, or, I think that's always the risk, right? But at the end of the day, we're trying to make sound decisions that are, backed up by, standard as guidance, to make sure that we're protecting the public and providing something that, is functional and safe.
So is this possible to move forward to next week? If you wanted to redo what I had suggested as far as the cutoff, it sounded like the council was good with that. Is there a way we can do that? Because you have to also consult with HDR, the other part of the contract. So does that be moved 2 weeks from now?
well, that's option 2 under Jeff's emails, like, hey, have a cutoff. Actually, we prefer a cutoff. I don't really want a full scope and budget and then get tipped over again at 30%, and then we have the wrong scope and budget, and then we're trying to go.
Well, there we go.
I mean, if we want to move something forward, ideally we'd move something forward next week. I don't know. I guess I would leave that to you, Nick, as to whether we can identify the right scope to get us to 30, I'd say 30% or whatever that milestone is in the contract.
Redo the contract or just turn it in the contract?
Yeah, it would have to be a brand new contract. I mean, it wouldn't be a new contract. It would be a consolidated version of the contract with modifications. There'd be a
reduced amendment.
Yeah,
right, basically.
We can do that.
And like Kylie talked, we can do whatever we want.
I mean, we're gonna have to talk to them side of the contract. They need to agree to it too, and so it could be that they want, you know, who knows what went into their decision-making process. You know, they could have wanted this scope, this long scope, because that had value to them, right? So we need to, I won't know if it's gonna be ready for next week until we dig into making the amendment and reaching out to them.
All right, so can we leave it open? And
Yeah.
council, you're okay if it even gets put in the packet on Monday? You're right? Is
Or
that it?
Wednesday. I might not, that's what I was saying.
Or
I might
Tuesday,
not,
yeah.
I might not have it renegotiated.
Keep this one in as a sort
So
of
we'll keep a
placeholder.
placeholder for next week with the understanding that if you can't come up with a contract terms, we'll just pull it. Okay?
So just to clarify, so if we do pull the contract, then I guess would would we be going back to the Public Works Committee with the, you know, the refined contract, or would we be going straight to study session?
Straight to study session.
Yeah, we're gonna go next week and vote on this if you guys can get the contract.
Yeah, I'm saying if there's some hang up in getting a, you know, a revised consolidated contract.
Might as well go to the rest of the council. What do you think? Just study session again? Which meets first? Public Works again?
It's gone through Public Works. Public Works has
Study
brought
session.
their input. Yeah, it's in our hands.
Study session, yep.
Okay.
All right.
I'm hopeful we can bring it next week and we can get it into.
Yeah, let's get
Consent. Just kidding. Sorry. Sorry, I try. I don't think I got that one.
Okay,
I didn't see it get shut down.
Okay, consent. Oh.
Not so much really track of this.
Study session.
We don't have to solve it right now, but so if we're doing just through the July 2020 open house, right? So we get all the terms on the table, it goes to the open house, we get feedback. We still have to decide who is selecting for alternative to move forward to 30% design. We don't have to solve it tonight, but
Say that again?
how we select the preferred alternative that would, in then a future contract, move forward to 30% design.
Right, that'll be before the
Can we
council.
cross that
Yeah.
right away when we get to it?
We can cross our, I just don't want to lose track of it.
Can we cross that bike lane? and get to-
Right.
Yeah.
So there we have a contract that says this is the preferred alternative that is then moving forward.
Yeah.
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 Cool. Okay.
Denise, are we good?
I'm not good, but I'm fine with that. I'm looking forward to getting shared definitions and all of that. So really looking forward to that active transportation plan.
Okay, thank you, Denise. Hey, folks, that concludes tonight's business for agenda bill briefings. I'm going to ask the council, if they need to take a break. It's 8:45, or do you want to knock out general council business and
power
Power through.
Let's be brief. We're hearing
The
powering
briefings.
through.
5 minutes or less, right, of each?
Public Works Committee briefing, Chair Vice President Revelowski.
36 seconds.
1 minute.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
A lot of the things we were discussed at council tonight. Kitsap Lake Stormwater Treatment Retrofit. That's going to bid in April, open in May, so they'll be here to see us next month. Pre-purchase.
The tip, do you want to talk about the tip, Jane?
Yes. So we had the first look at how Public Works staff is rating the tip. And it needs some refinement because the #1 project that came out was doing a gigantic traffic circle on Kitsap Way at Corbett. So the way it's set up now needs more refinement, and they want to go to the Complete Streets Committee first, which has I guess it's got 3 community members, and then after they talk with them about it, their next quarterly meeting, they're going to bring it back to us. But we have to approve the tip in June, so there's not going to be much time for refinement. Denise, did you have anything else you wanted to add to the tip?
No, I think you covered it well.
Okay. I did have, well, I guess Denise already brought it up, the concerns we have that staff, doesn't see us as a committee. We're just a couple council members who they talk to once a month. So that's kind of disappointing, but we'll keep working for that. Jeff, you got anything else you want to add?
Public Works, no.
Yeah. Pretty much we discussed everything tonight.
Yeah. Make sure I remember.
That's
All
it.
right, and now, Finance Committee, Jeff.
Who's fit? Director Barker is still here, so he gets a lot of kudos. Great, and BCAT as well, and Colleen and everyone there. Great BCAT promo out, video for YouTube and online describing the pros plan. Really fantastic video. Anna was here, she'd love it, plain language. We're working on the pros plan draft. As they're able, they're gonna send us feedback for our districts on parks in our district. So Denise, you may not have too much homework, I'm sorry. But
Silver linings.
Like features.
that's right. So that's coming to us. And then again, Anna, when you watch this, Haddon Park Playground build is scheduled for April 19th. Exact time to be announced, but set aside your calendars, folks, to help out with that on the 19th of April. But a heads up, after it's installed, there's still a little bit of work to do before it can be used. So just so folks know, they're not playing out that afternoon, but yeah, week or two. A lot of good cybersecurity improvements coming in, thanks to Mr. Sorensen and his team. We got grants the past 2 years for doing assessment, hiring professionals, getting equipment, and he's applying for more to keep that going. And then the very last item is we've asked to, I know, crazy talk on Finance Committee, deep dive into the city financials, especially with kind of the budget outlook. So I did notice, thanks to a community member speaking up, that those monthly reports were only appearing through October, as recently as a couple weeks ago. So I know Mike looked into that, and he's now got November and December up there. He's waiting to close out 2024 in December. And then next month, we're going to do a real deep dive. We'll have all of 2024 closed out, and then the first 3 months of 2025 to see where we are on track with projected budget and actuals and our revenue and expenses. So I think
So let me add one thing. That video that they did for parks, it's the best piece of community outreach I've seen in the 25 years I've lived here. It is really wonderful. You guys did a great job on that.
Like the narrative.
Yeah, well, there's that.
Yeah.
Okay, regional other committee meetings.
I just have an update for LTAC. So we have a committee meeting on Friday, and I can forward this to you, but just to summarize, the LTAC committee they're not really going to be able to spend the time to submit a new list of recommended entities and funding amounts. So it's kind of a procedure.
They passed that?
No,
Okay.
but this is just some clarifying questions. So because, we don't want to get into the weeds of them coming back with a whole new set of recommendations, right? So they're able to submit comments under the RCW, and the comments must include analysis of the extent to which the proposal will accommodate activities for tourists or increase tourism, et cetera, et cetera. So we're meeting Friday, and I'll have more to share with you at the next study session, or maybe even at the briefing next week.
I don't want to hear it.
Perfect. I don't want to share it anyway. I do.
You have to share it.
I do. I will, actually, and I do want to.
Other council business as necessary.
I think I'll save it for later.
All right. Okay, so before we adjourn, reminder, the next council meeting will be Wednesday, April 2nd, 5:30 p.m. First floor meeting chambers. Hard to believe it's going to be April already. Public is invited, can in person or remotely. Anyone wishing to speak during public recognition via Zoom must submit the request through the city clerk by calling 360-473-5323 at least 24 hours prior to the meeting. Folks, this meeting's adjourned. Good night.
Thank you.
What?
Well, I did not know we had